Chapter 375. Roar. An earth-shaking roar resounded endlessly through the heavens and earth. Everyone felt a buzzing sound exploding in their heads. Even the half-martial emperors had grave expressions on their faces and turned pale. There was no need to mention those below the half-martial emperor level. They were already lying on the ground in a mess of injuries. Roar. In the sky, Xiao Yan's expression instantly changed when he heard the earth-shaking dragon roar. When he lifted his gaze and looked at the sword dragon, the huge dragon claw formed from countless swords was violently clashing with Xiao Jin's dragon claw. Ear-piercing clanging sounds were continuously emitted as sparks flew in all directions. Xiao Jin. Xiao Yan's eyes hardened. He had originally controlled the North King with his mind to make a last stand. However, he did not expect that Xiao Jin would be the one to block it in the end. Clang, clang, clang. The intense collisions did not stop. Sparks that were as beautiful as stars sprinkled down like a rain of fire. Xiao Jin's huge body twisted as it violently collided with the sword dragon in front of it. Its body, which was already riddled with injuries, was covered with sword scars in the process of colliding with the sword dragon. Pieces of dragon scales with a dim golden glow slid down from Xiao Jin's body. Fresh blood splattered. Fresh blood that still carried some warmth drifted and landed on Xiao Yan's face. The thick smell of blood caused Xiao Yan's expression to gradually turn gloomy. His powerless hands under his sleeves were once again tightly clenched. With a thought from Xiao Yan, the North King's body shot out like a cannonball. It stepped through the air and instantly arrived at the sword dragon's abdomen. It waved its iron fist and shattered many of the swords on the dragon's body with a single punch. The North King, who had just recovered from its injuries, attacked the sword dragon in front of it with all its strength. Even though it used all its strength, the huge gap in strength made all of its actions seem like a drop in the bucket. Without a powerful attack, it would be very difficult to shatter the sword dragon. Brat, if you want to break this sword dragon, attack its head. That is the core of the sword dragon controlled by the Do-Di. If you break it, this sword dragon will be destroyed. While Xiao Yan was at his wit's end, Guyu's voice was finally emitted from within his body. The moment he opened his mouth, he informed Xiao Yan of the sword dragon's weakness. Xiao Yan secretly nodded. He raised his gaze and looked at the sword dragon. The next moment, Xiao Yan's heart could not help but sink slightly. Although the sword dragon's head was its weakness, at the same time, it was also the place that the sword dragon guarded the most. Over there, no matter which direction Xiao Yan attacked from, he would be sensed by the sword dragon. Furthermore, with Jianming's control, it was impossible to break through the sword dragon. Xiao Yan's heart immediately became a little heavy when he thought of this. At the same time, he was also aware of the situation he was currently facing. This was the only path he could take if he wanted to break the sword dragon. Otherwise, if this continued, not only would something happen to him, but it was likely that even Xiao Jin would be implicated. No matter what, he had to go all out and give it a try. Xiao Yan's eyes were sharp as he stared at the enormous sword dragon in front of him. His throat rolled as he swallowed another 2D-tier medicinal pills into his stomach. Following the spread of the medicinal strength, a powerful aura swiftly gathered within Xiao Yan's body. Jianming below involuntarily emitted a cold snort when he saw the sudden unexpected change in the sky. A thought passed through his heart, and the aura of the sword dragon, which was clashing with Xiao Jin, suddenly soared. The originally barely balanced battle situation was also broken at this moment. The sword dragon let out a heaven-shaking roar as countless sword beams shot out from its enormous dragon claws. Sharp sword beams shot out from its entire body as it ruthlessly slashed at Xiao Jin's body. In an instant, Xiao Jin, who was facing the enemy head-on, could not avoid being slashed by the sword glows. Numerous shallow and deep sword scars repeatedly smashed onto Xiao Jin's body like raindrops. Fresh blood dripped from it. One could even vaguely see the dense white bones under the cut flesh. Xiao Jin, on the other hand, continued to roar from its mouth. It continued to firmly block the sword dragon in front of it, preventing the sword glows from injuring Xiao Yan. Jianming, I already said that I will only use 20% of my strength. Do you really not put me in your eyes by doing this? Seeing this scene, Luo Jin immediately shouted angrily. He treated Xiao Yan as a friend and Xiao Jin had a close relationship with Xiao Yan. Naturally, he would not sit back and do nothing, allowing Jianming to harm Xiaojin. Cuckoo, Pavilion Chief must be joking. We only said that we will only use 20% of our strength when facing Xiaoyan. We did not say that we will show mercy to this beast. We are already being merciful by not killing it with one strike. Luojin was furious in his heart, but he had nothing to say. He could only turn his body, and the douqi in his body churned as he flew over to help Xiaojin. Cuckoo, I think that it is better for Pavilion Chief to remain here. If you move, I only need to wave my finger. Before you can fly over, that beast and Xiaoyan will likely die together. Jianming, how dare you threaten this Pavilion Chief? Hearing Jianming's dark, cold laughter, Luojin was finally unable to endure it any longer. He suddenly cried out angrily and waved his hand. The jade fan in his hand instantly opened, and a douqi pillar shot toward Jianming. Jianming randomly dissolved Luojin's attack. The corner of his mouth lifted into a mocking smile. He looked at Luojin with a calm smile and said, Pavilion Chief, don't be angry. There is no need for Pavilion Chief to be angry. The reason why I am doing this is because I hope that I will not accidentally injure Pavilion Chief. After all, the aim of our trip this time around is only to target Xiaoyan. It has nothing to do with the Hidden Cloud Pavilion. We are indeed sorry for accidentally injuring the elders of your pavilion earlier. However, we hope that Pavilion Chief can give in on the matter of Xiaoyan. The reason why Jianming was afraid of the Yunin Pavilion was because of the faction behind the Yunin Pavilion. Currently, Luojin was alone. Without the support of that person, he was merely an ordinary 8-star half-emperor. In Jianming's opinion, if he really wanted to kill a half-emperor, it would only take a single thought. It was not enough to reach the apex. Humph. This Pavilion Chief will still say the same thing. If anything happens to Xiaoyan today, the four of you, along with your sex, must disappear together. Luojin's chest rose and fell intensely as he roared angrily at Jianming. Jianming frowned tightly. No matter what, he was still afraid of Luojin's threat. The others also frowned once again. However, when they shot their gazes toward Xiaoyan, they could not help but think of the sky extinction steps. This was a great opportunity related to the sky extinction ancient tomb. No matter what, they could not easily let it go. In the sky, bright red blood continued to pour down, completely dyeing Xiaoyan, who was behind Xiaojin, into a blood person. The furious roar gradually weakened and turned into a hoarse low roar. The roar was filled with deep unwillingness and pain. Even so, Xiaojin still persevered in pain. No matter what, it would use its body to block the sharp swords that wanted to harm Xiaoyan. Countless sharp swords pierced into Xiaojin's body. Its scarlet flesh was cut open, and blood splattered everywhere. Its flesh and blood were separated, and the eerie white bones reflected a cold luster, causing one's heart to turn even colder. Humph, even if I can't kill Xiaoyan today, I definitely can't let him leave Green City unscathed. If I can't kill him, then I'll cut off one of your arms. Jianming's expression was gloomy as he sneered in his heart. Everyone raised their gazes and looked at the battle circle in the sky. When they saw the scene in front of them, everyone could not help but gasp. A chill unconsciously rose in their hearts. Under the jagged sword light, Xiaojin was already like a lamp that had run out of oil. It was because of this that it tried even harder to protect the sword dragon in front of it, blocking all the sword light on its body. It was also because of this that pieces of flesh mixed with broken bones were repeatedly sent flying from Xiaojin's body. A portion of the sword glow was already able to penetrate Xiaojin's body, and had even nearly injured Xiaoyan. This caused Xiaojin to go all out, hoping that it could ensure Xiaoyan's safety. The eyes of Jianming and the others below contained some envy as they looked at Xiaoyan, who was standing still behind Xiaojin. Xiaojin's action caused even them to involuntarily be moved. They would probably never get a person who was willing to risk his life for them in this lifetime. Humph, this beast is really loyal. It's a pity that no matter how loyal you are, it's futile in the face of reality. However, the corners of Jianming's mouth curled into a sinister smile. He slowly raised his shriveled hands from under his sleeves, and clenched them tightly the moment he let out a sinister laugh. Since you're so desperate to protect Xiaoyan, then you can die first. With a sinister laugh, Jianming's mind stirred. The sword dragon in the sky suddenly roared at the sky, letting out a deep sword cry. Following that, its huge body suddenly shook, and its dragon claws forcefully broke free from Xiao Jin's restraints. The longsword condensed, and the huge dragon claws were raised high, slashing down fiercely at Xiao Jin's head. When Luo Jin saw this, although he wanted to make a move, in the end, he lowered his head with a gloomy expression and let out a heavy sigh. In this current situation, if he were to make a move, he would definitely be stopped by Chen Zhen and the others. This would also cause the current situation to become even more chaotic. When that time came, it was likely that Xiao Yan would have difficulty surviving even with the Yunin Pavilion in front of him. At this moment, for the sake of Xiao Yan, Luo Jin could only watch helplessly regardless of how unwilling he was in his heart. Young master. Zhang Yi's voice sounded beside Luo Jin's ear. Only then did Luo Jin recover. There was still this elite Do Di by his side. Unfortunately, it was already too late at this moment. Xiao Jin was already too late to rescue him. Ugh, no matter what, we must protect brother Xiao Yan. I can only apologize for the matter of Xiao Jin in the future. As for the 4 large sects, I will definitely make them pay the price after today. Luo Jin's expression was gloomy as he lowered his head and spoke. No, young master. What the old me means is that little friend Xiao Yan seems to be a little off. Ha! Before Zhang Yi's voice sounded, Luo Jin's eyes suddenly hardened. He lifted his gaze and stared at Xiao Yan, who was standing still in the sky. At this moment, the latter was still standing in the sky without moving. The intense battle in front of him seemed to have nothing to do with him. Both of his eyes were tightly shut and his expression was calm. Seeing this scene, Luo Jin could not help but frown slightly. Given Xiao Yan's feelings for Xiao Yan, if something were to happen to the latter, Xiao Yan would definitely not ignore it like this. No matter what situation he was in, Xiao Yan would definitely not ignore Xiao Jin's life and death. Since this was the case, then what was going on with his current situation? Immediately after, Luo Jin's expression changed drastically after he probed Xiao Yan's aura. This was because even with his strength, he was unable to detect the exact aura of Xiao Yan. What is going on? In the next moment, the moment the huge dragon claw in the sky viciously hacked down on Xiao Yan's head, the quiet and unmoving Xiao Yan finally opened his eyes at this moment. At this moment, golden light shot out. Heavenly flames that covered the sky swiftly swept across the sky, with Xiao Yan at the center. King Kong Glass Body. Chapter 376. Die. The frightening wind from the fist violently struck Jianming's face. At the same time that it brought about waves of piercing pain, it also caused him to feel suffocated. However, Jianming's face appeared incomparably calm in the face of Xiao Yan's all-out attack. Even though the enormous golden fist had already covered all of his vision, Jianming still remained indifferent. Bang! The next moment, a clear muffled sound appeared. The enormous golden-colored fist, which was a couple of times larger than Jianming's entire body, was forcefully stopped a couple of inches from Jianming's face. Regardless of how Xiao Yan used all his strength, his metal fist was unable to advance even an inch forward. What? Xiao Yan's heart was suddenly startled when he saw this scene. He did not expect that his all-out attack would not even be able to touch Jianming's body. The terror of an elite Do Di was obvious from this. Hee. Brat, your courage is commendable. However, you think too highly of yourself. Do you think that you, a mere bandit, will have the chance to hurt me? What a joke. Jianming involuntarily laughed out loud when he saw the expression on Xiao Yan's face. The corner of his mouth was lifted into a savage smile as he laughed sternly. You are unable to even break the protective sword aura of this D. On what basis do you say that you want to kill me? Don't tell me that you want to rely on this mouth of yours. If I don't try, how will I know if I can break it? Xiao Yan's expression was grave as he snorted coldly. He immediately waved his large hand and a dense white, heavenly flame immediately spluttered out from all over his body. It transformed into numerous lines of fire that swiftly wrapped around Jianming in front of him. The temperature of the place suddenly rose the moment the heavenly flame surged out. The originally neutral air suddenly became dry, causing the breathing of everyone in the city to become a little dry. This heavenly flame is a little different from the other heavenly flames in his body. Wu Jitian frowned and reached out to grab the air in front of him. He could not help but exclaim when he felt the scorching temperature in the air. Indeed, this brat is really strange. Looking at the power of his bone-chilling flame, it is obvious that it is not the main body. However, if it is compared to other seed flames, it is much stronger. Chen Zhen nodded slightly when he heard this. With his spiritual strength, the results of his investigation were clearly much clearer than Wu Jitian's. However, he was also unable to pinpoint the difference between the bone-chilling fire and the bone-chilling fire. Haha, the most mysterious thing about this little friend is how he fused the heavenly flames in his body together. Although this old man has heard of some cultivation methods that can fuse 2 or 3 heavenly flames together, to be able to fuse almost all of the heavenly flames together like this, isn't this too heaven-defying? Yi Luotian narrowed his old eyes as he stared deeply at the bone-freezing flame on Xiao Yan's body. He stroked his white beard with one hand and placed the other behind his back as he chuckled. On the other side, the dense white heavenly flame wrapped around Jianming, causing him to look like a fire cocoon from the outside. Although he had a sword aura protecting his body, the frighteningly high temperature of the bone-chilling flame still caused Jianming to suffer, even though he was separated by the sword aura. Moreover, under the continuous burning of the heavenly flame, Jianming could clearly sense that his protective sword aura was being incessantly burned. The terror of the heavenly flame was enough to break through his protective sword aura in a short period of time. Xiao Yan also took advantage of this opportunity. His enormous body suddenly danced as his fist violently smashed against the sword aura that was wrapped by the heavenly flame. Bang! Jianming's body, which was wrapped by the heavenly flame, instantly shot out like a football when the fist landed. Xiao Yan took a step forward and used the sky extinction steps once again. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived above Jianming's head. His mountain-like body suddenly turned as a whip leg violently smashed against the sword aura from top to bottom. Bang! With a loud bang, Jianming's body was like a cannonball as it violently smashed into the city below, stirring up dust that filled the sky. Ha! Xiao Yan roared at the sky. His body moved once again, and instantly fell into the city below. Bang! 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 Hundreds of heavy hammers struck consecutively. However, the sword aura shield around Jianming's body was still intact. Ha! When Xiao Yan once again threw a punch, an intense sword glow suddenly shot out from under the thin heavenly flame. The sword was pointed at Xiao Yan. The eyes of the golden giant that Xiao Yan had transformed into hardened. His body twisted and he actually dodged the sword. At the same time, his other idle left hand suddenly clenched into a fist as it violently smashed towards Jianming. Bang! Ha! Unlike before, this time, the huge fist that Xiao Yan had thrown out was blocked by an arm that was as thin as a chopstick. It was Jianming. Xiao Yan, this emperor gave you 500 moves. Unfortunately, you were unable to break through this emperor's protective sword aura. You have let this emperor down. Roar! Before Jianming could finish his sentence, Xiao Yan suddenly extended his right hand. As if he was catching a loach, he grabbed Jianming, who had yet to finish speaking, in his palm. Octane blast. A thunderous roar spread out. A terrifying aura condensed into an invisible storm that swept away all the gravel and dust within 1,000 feet of Xiao Yan. At the same time, Xiao Yan also raised his right fist that was holding Jianming. When the latter regained his senses, he fiercely smashed his fist into the huge pit in front of him. Following the shout, when Jianming regained his senses, Xiao Yan had already thrown out dozens of punches. Bang! Once again, the attack from Xiao Yan's hand was blocked by Jianming. Jianming blocked Xiao Yan's attack with one hand. He looked at the sword aura that was wrapped around his body, and was on the verge of shattering. He could not help but be shocked by Xiao Yan's violence. With just his flesh and blood, he was able to unleash such a terrifying attack that almost shattered his protective sword aura. In his knowledge, other than Wu Jitian, no one else could compare to such a terrifying physical cultivation. Xiao Yan, you have really caused this D to look at you in a different light. Octane blast. Bang! Xiao Yan's attack was once again blocked by Jianming. The latter snorted coldly and laughed ruthlessly. What, after the first time, do you still expect a second time? Bang! Even though Jianming's heart was filled with disdain and ridicule, Xiaoyan once again ruthlessly kicked his face, just as the words were about to leave his mouth. This time around, not only was Jianming sent flying, but even the protective sword aura around him was finally broken. Seeing this scene, not only the surrounding crowd, but even Wu Jitian and the others in the distance could not help but feel stunned in their hearts. Jianming had expected that Xiaoyan would use both his fists. However, he seemed to have forgotten that he still had a pair of legs that were even more overbearing. This time around, Jianming had indeed thought too highly of himself and had been careless. Otherwise, with his strength as a Dodi, how could Xiaoyan have caused him to repeatedly suffer losses? It was because Jianming had looked down on his enemy that he had repeatedly been defeated by Xiaoyan. At the end of the day, this could be considered as him asking for it. Bastard! Do you really think that you are able to contend against this D? This kick had broken through Jianming's protective sword aura, and also seemed to have completely awakened him. Finally, a terrifying aura that had been suppressed for a long time swiftly swept out in all directions with Jianming's body as the epicenter, when Jianming stood up and scathed. At the same time his voice sounded, for enormous swords that towered into the sky also swiftly rose from the ground around Xiaoyan's body, surrounding him within. Surrounded by walls, Xiaoyan lifted his gaze and looked at the sky above. That was his only way out at this moment. Xiaoyan's feet arched slightly as he prepared to jump out of the cage. Trying to hide? It won't be so easy. Having already seen through Xiaoyan's intention, Jianming coldly snorted. The seal in his hand changed, and another enormous sword swiftly formed above Xiaoyan's head. It was just waiting for Jianming's order to cut Xiaoyan in half. 6th Style, Sword Seal. Chapter 377. Die. The frightening wind from the fist violently struck Jianming's face. At the same time that it brought about waves of piercing pain, it also caused him to feel suffocated. However, Jianming's face appeared incomparably calm in the face of Xiaoyan's all-out attack. Even though the enormous golden fist had already covered all of his vision, Jianming still remained indifferent. Bang! The next moment, a clear muffled sound appeared. The enormous golden-colored fist, which was a couple of times larger than Jianming's entire body, was forcefully stopped a couple of inches from Jianming's face. Regardless of how Xiaoyan used all his strength, his metal fist was unable to advance even an inch forward. What? Xiaoyan's heart was suddenly startled when he saw this scene. He did not expect that his all-out attack would not even be able to touch Jianming's body. The terror of an elite Dodi was obvious from this. Hee, brat, your courage is commendable. However, aren't you thinking too highly of yourself? Do you think that you, a mere bandit, have the chance to hurt me? What a joke. Jianming involuntarily laughed out loud when he saw the expression on Xiaoyan's face. The corner of his mouth was lifted into a savage smile as he laughed sternly. You are unable to even break the protective sword aura of this D. On what basis do you say that you want to kill me? Don't tell me that you want to rely on this mouth of yours. If I don't try, how would I know if I can break it? Xiaoyan's expression was solemn as he snorted coldly. He immediately waved his large hand and a dense white, heavenly flame immediately spluttered out from all over his body. It transformed into numerous lines of fire that swiftly wrapped around Jianming in front of him. The temperature of the place suddenly rose the moment the heavenly flame surged out. The originally neutral air suddenly became dry, causing the breathing of everyone in the city to become a little dry. This heavenly flame is a little different from the other heavenly flames in his body. Wu Jitian frowned and reached out to grab the air in front of him. He could not help but exclaim when he felt the scorching temperature in the air. Indeed, this brat is really strange. Looking at the power of his bone-chilling flame, it is obvious that it is not the main body. However, if it is compared to other seed flames, it is much stronger. Chen Zhen nodded slightly when he heard this. With his spiritual strength, the results of his investigation were clearly much clearer than Wu Jitian's. However, he was also unable to pinpoint the difference between the bone-chilling fire and the bone-chilling fire. The most mysterious thing about this little friend is how he fused the heavenly flames in his body together. Although this old man has heard of some cultivation methods that can fuse 2 or 3 heavenly flames together, to be able to fuse almost all of the heavenly flames together like this, isn't this too heaven-defying? Yi Luotian narrowed his old eyes as he stared deeply at the bone-freezing flame on Xiaoyan's body. He stroked his white beard with one hand, and placed the other behind his back as he chuckled. On the other side, the dense white heavenly flame wrapped around Jianming, causing him to appear like a fire cocoon from the outside. Although he had a sword aura protecting his body, the frighteningly high temperature of the bone-chilling flame still caused Jianming to suffer even though he was separated by the sword aura. Moreover, under the continuous burning of the heavenly flame, Jianming could clearly sense that his protective sword aura was being continuously burned. The frightening heavenly flame was enough to break through his protective sword aura in a short period of time. Xiaoyan also took advantage of this opportunity. His enormous body suddenly danced as a fist violently smashed against the sword aura that was wrapped by the heavenly flame. Bang! Jianming's body, which was wrapped by the heavenly flame, instantly shot out like a football when the fist landed. Xiaoyan took a step forward and used the sky extinction steps once again. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived above Jianming's head. His mountain-like body suddenly turned as a whip leg violently smashed against the sword aura from top to bottom. Bang! With a loud bang, Jianming's body was like a cannonball as it violently smashed into the city below, stirring up dust that filled the sky. Ha! Xiaoyan roared at the sky. His body moved once again and instantly fell into the city below. Bang! 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 Hundreds of heavy hammers struck consecutively. However, the sword aura shield around Jianming's body was still intact. When Xiaoyan once again threw a punch, an intense sword glow suddenly shot out from under the thin heavenly flame. The sword was pointed at Xiaoyan. The eyes of the golden giant that Xiaoyan had transformed into hardened. His body twisted and he actually dodged the sword. At the same time, his other idle left hand suddenly clenched into a fist and violently smashed towards Jianming. Bang! Unlike before, this time, the huge fist that Xiaoyan had thrown out was blocked by an arm that was as thin as a chopstick. It was Jianming. Xiaoyan, this emperor gave you 500 moves. Unfortunately, you were unable to break through this emperor's protective sword aura. You have let this emperor down. Roar! Before Jianming could finish his sentence, Xiaoyan suddenly extended his right hand. As if he was catching a loach, he grabbed Jianming, who had yet to finish speaking, in his palm. Octane blast! A thunderous roar spread out. A terrifying aura condensed into an invisible storm that swept away all the gravel and dust within 1,000 feet of Xiaoyan. At the same time, Xiaoyan also raised his right fist that was holding Jianming. When the latter regained his senses, he fiercely smashed his fist into the huge pit in front of him. Following the shout, when Jianming regained his senses, Xiaoyan had already thrown out dozens of punches. Bang! Once again, the attack from Xiaoyan's hand was blocked by Jianming. Jianming blocked Xiaoyan's attack with one hand, and looked at the sword aura that was on the verge of shattering around him. He could not help but be shocked by Xiaoyan's violence. With just a body of flesh and blood, he was able to unleash such a terrifying attack that almost shattered his protective sword aura. In his knowledge, other than Wu Jitian, no one else could compare to such a terrifying physical cultivation. Xiaoyan, you have really caused this D to look at you in a different light. Octane blast. Bang! Xiaoyan's attack was once again blocked by Jianming. The latter snorted coldly and laughed ruthlessly. What, after the first time, do you still expect a second time? Bang! Even though Jianming's heart was filled with disdain and ridicule, Xiaoyan once again ruthlessly kicked his face, just as the words were about to leave his mouth. This time around, not only was Jianming sent flying, but even the protective sword aura around him was finally broken. Seeing this scene, not only the surrounding crowd, but even Wu Jitian and the others in the distance could not help but feel stunned in their hearts. Jianming had expected that Xiaoyan would use both his fists. However, he seemed to have forgotten that Xiaoyan still had a pair of legs that were even more overbearing. This time around, Jianming had indeed thought too highly of himself and had been careless. Otherwise, with his strength as a Dodi, how could Xiaoyan have caused him to repeatedly suffer losses? It was because Jianming had looked down on his enemy that he had repeatedly been defeated by Xiaoyan. At the end of the day, this could be considered as him asking for it. Get lost. Do you really think that you are able to contend against this D? This kick had broken through Jianming's protective sword aura, and also seemed to have completely awakened him. Finally, a terrifying aura that had been suppressed for a long time swiftly swept out in all directions with Jianming's body as the epicenter, when Jianming stood up and scathed. At the same time his voice sounded, for enormous swords that towered into the sky also swiftly rose from the ground around Xiaoyan's body, surrounding him within. Xiaoyan lifted his gaze and looked at the sky above him. That was his only way out at this moment. Xiaoyan's feet arched slightly as he prepared to jump out of the cage. Trying to hide? It won't be so easy. Having already seen through Xiaoyan's intention, Jianming coldly snorted. The seal in his hand changed, and another enormous sword swiftly formed above Xiaoyan's head. It was just waiting for Jianming's order to cut Xiaoyan in half. 6th Style, Sword Seal. Chapter 378. The vast and mighty sword aura spread apart like a wave under the cry. The 4 enormous swords surrounding Xiaoyan trembled intensely. The ground cracked as the invisible sword aura unleashed a frightening pressure on Xiaoyan from all directions. This was especially the case with Xiaoyan's current King Kong glass body. It was impossible for him to dodge the suppression of the sword aura. Xiaoyan's body, which had leaped upward, was involuntarily paused in midair under the encirclement of the sword aura. Attempting to charge out of the encirclement was akin to ascending to heaven. This was especially the case after the enormous sword above Xiaoyan's head was formed. It was even more impossible for Xiaoyan to dodge this attack from Jianming. Jianming, you have repeatedly challenged this pavilion chief's bottom line. Do you really think that there is no one in my Yunin pavilion? Luo Jin suddenly took a step forward. Zhang Yi by his side followed closely behind. The pressure of a 2-star Do Di immediately swept out, and swept toward Jianming, and the others on the opposite side. Luo Jin's expression instantly became grave when he saw that Jianming had actually used the 6th move of his 7-sword skill, Sword Seal, which was famous for sealing off one's escape route. At the same time, a cluster of fierce fury suddenly rose from the bottom of his heart. A pair of dark black eyes were about to spew out a scarlet flame. At this moment, the strength that Jianming had unleashed had clearly exceeded his strength by 20%. After repeatedly witnessing Xiaoyan's heaven-defying strength, Jianming clearly did not intend to let Xiaoyan leave alive. He wanted to eliminate all future troubles. If Xiaoyan did not die today, he would definitely become a great threat to their forcex in the future. Even if it was for the sake of their own survival, Jianming believed that Chen Zhen and the other 2 behind him would definitely not sit back and do nothing. TSK Pavilion Chief, things have already come to this point. Don't tell me that you still hope to use your background to suppress our forcex? If the person behind you was here today, the 4 of us would really not dare to touch Xiaoyan. Unfortunately, Jianming's tone was dark and stern as he coldly laughed. At the same time, the Do Qi within his body swiftly surged. The 4 enormous swords that sealed Xiaoyan also glowed brightly. Wave after wave of vast and mighty pressure continued to spread from them, firmly suppressing Xiaoyan within that narrow space. Pavilion Chief, we originally did not intend to be enemies with you. As long as you do not interfere in this matter today, the 4 of us will naturally leave once we have finished off Xiaoyan. However, if you insist on using the Yunin Pavilion's signboard to suppress us, don't blame us for fighting to the death with you. Chen Zhen's expression was cold as he faced Luo Jin. He gently stepped forward and a faint pressure spread out, completely blocking Zhang Yi's aura. At the same time, an invisible pressure turned into a circle that surrounded Zhang Yi and Luo Jin within it. In this way, any small action from the 2 of them would not be missed by Chen Zhen. It was just as Jianming had thought. Although Xiaoyan's current strength was insufficient to fight against them, his age was still there. Additionally, his strength far exceeded his own cultivation. Chen Zhen did not doubt that if they allowed Xiaoyan to continue growing, it was likely that the 4 of them would not be a match for him in the future even if they joined forces. They had done quite a lot of things to nip any possibility of a threat in the bud. On the other side, the moment Jianming's cry sounded, the enormous sword above Xiaoyan's head emitted a dazzling white glow at this moment, causing everyone present to be unable to open their eyes. Sword Seal. Under the order, the golden-colored enormous sword, which emitted a dazzling white glow, violently smashed down like a meteorite falling from the sky at this moment. Xiao Yan, who was surrounded from all sides, had no way of dodging this frightening attack. Once this sword really landed on his body, he would definitely die today. At the same time, however, a feeling of helplessness rose in Xiao Yan's heart. This attack of Jianming had displayed his true strength. Faced with an attack from an 8-star Dodi, it was impossible for Xiao Yan to block it with his current strength. Hence, if nothing unexpected happened, Xiao Yan would definitely die in Jianming's hands today. I can't care so much. No matter what happens today, I must first block these 4 lunatics. No matter what, I want Xiao Yan to live. Luo Jin was finally unable to endure any longer when he saw that Xiao Yan was in danger. He waved his hand and the greater 1-star plate, which was on the verge of shattering, once again appeared in his hand. All the Do Qi in his body poured into the greater 1-star plate in his hand at this moment. A cream-white glow immediately surged out from the star plate, transforming into numerous cream-white light ribbons that swiftly charged toward Chen Zhen's aura. At the same time, Zhang Yi by the side also swiftly danced with a solemn expression. Numerous complicated seals were swiftly formed as an ancient aura swiftly agglomerated in his palm. Sensing the aura between Zhang Yi's palms, even Wu Jitian and Yi Luotian, who had been sitting and watching, involuntarily turned their eyes over. Clearly, even though they were high-class Do Di, they could not help but be a little moved when faced with this Do skill in Zhang Yi's hand. Spirit class Do skill. Wu Jitian's eyes flickered as he spoke in a deep voice. This Do skill is likely an extremely extraordinary existence even among the spirit class Do skills. Elder Chen Zhen narrowed his eyes. This kind of Do skill was something that even they did not possess. It was unexpected that an ordinary elder of Yunin Pavilion would possess it. This also indirectly explained the strength of Yunin Pavilion to them. Silent extermination palm. Zhang Yi ignored the surprise of these few people. When the explosive cry from his mouth sounded, an enormous dark black palm immediately appeared in the empty space above his head. It carried an incomparably vast and mighty aura as it violently smashed toward Chen Zhen. Even though this was the case, Chen Zhen's expression remained calm. Although the spirit class Do skill was powerful, the gap in strength between him and Zhang Yi was not something that could be easily made up for with just one Do skill. A Do Di was not comparable to a Ban Di. At this level, only those who possessed truly great strength could dominate the battlefield. Kuku Zhang Yi, you really make the old me envious. You, a 2-star Do Di, actually possess a spirit class Do skill. Unfortunately, although the Do skill is quite good, it is ultimately unable to unleash its true strength in your hands. Chen Zhen stared enviously at the pitch-black heaven-towering palm, but a faint smile emerged from his mouth. Of course, the thing that surprises the old me the most is that since you have already displayed this Do skill, it is unexpected that you would actually point it at me. Don't tell me that you don't know that my defense is the strongest among the 4 of us? Today, the old me will let you witness the skills of a rank 5 formation master. A thought passed through Chen Zhen's mind as his cold laughter sounded. Immediately, a vast and frightening spiritual strength swiftly surged out from between his brows. It swiftly agglomerated into a mysterious large formation under Zhang Yi and Luo Jin's feet. This is bad. Quickly retreat. Luo Jin's pale face immediately changed drastically when he saw this. Although he reacted in time, it was ultimately too late. The moment Luo Jin's words left his mouth, the mysterious large golden formation had already been completely formed. Numerous golden light pillars with a diameter of 1 meter rose from the large formation and surrounded the 2 of them. 9 Heavenly Lightning Prison Formation, activate. The lightning prison formation was activated. Purgatory's side. In today's battle, not only Xiao Yan, but even Luo Jin would have difficulty escaping death. Chapter 379. The expression on Xiao Yan's face, which was covered by the golden light, was extremely grave as he sensed the powerful sword aura pouncing toward him. Although he had yet to truly come into contact with the might of the enormous sword, just the aura that seeped out was enough to allow Xiao Yan to sense a dense aura of death. This kind of real aura was not only created by the frightening strength of the sword. Most of it was formed from the resentment that had accumulated on it after it had been used and fought countless times. It was difficult to imagine just how many experts had been killed by this enormous sword. The grave expression on Xiao Yan's face became denser the greater the might of this enormous sword. Even the usually fearless Xiao Yan involuntarily felt a sense of helplessness rising from his heart in the face of an elite Dodi. A Bandi and a Dodi were indeed two completely different levels. Even though their concepts were similar, the gap between them was like the gap between the heavens and the earth. With Xiao Yan's current strength, he would have difficulty dealing with a 9-star Bandi, much less an elite Dodi in front of him. Was this the end of his journey? Xiao Yan muttered unwillingly in his heart. The dense white heavenly flame that rose on his body dimmed. His body softened, and Xiao Yan's small mountain-like body began to fall uncontrollably like a small boat under the wind pressure. If one lost confidence in one's body, all of one's strength would be in vain. If one's bones turned soft, how would one be able to stand up even if one's entire body was filled with muscles? Brat humph, are you really such a coward? Gu Yu's stern cry suddenly rose from the bottom of Xiao Yan's heart, as he powerlessly fell to the ground. At this moment, the only person who could rationally face all of this was likely Gu Yu, who was within Xiao Yan's body. However, unlike in the past, Gu Yu's words did not cause the expression on Xiao Yan's face to improve. The emotions in his heart had become incomparably low. Old Gu, there is no need for you to say anything more. I have really done my best. Perhaps this is my limit. This junior Xiao Yan will likely disappoint you. Xiao Yan's tightly clenched hand slowly relaxed. He seemed to have given up on the last trace of unwillingness in his heart. He had abandoned all resistance. He had already been completely defeated in front of absolute strength. There was no room for negotiation. At the same time, Xiao Yan's heart clearly understood that Gu Yu would not intervene this time around. He would not pitifully beg Gu Yu to intervene. Xiao Yan's strength, after all. Xiao Yan could not rely on Xiao Yan's strength to help him. Xiao Yan could not rely on Gu Yu. It's fine if you die, but don't tell me you want to implicate your brother? Open your eyes and take a look. Luo Jin is going all out to block the attacks of the formation. Even though he is seriously injured, he has never thought of giving up. He is doing all of this for you. Yet look at you. You are actually giving up so easily. In that case, won't all of his efforts be wasted? Gu Yu's furious reprimand once again sounded in Xiao Yan's heart. This caused Xiao Yan to feel guilty and involuntarily stir a little. Xiao Yan lifted his eyes. He looked through the enormous swords formed from Do Qi, and looked at the battleground where Luo Jin was fighting. Luo Jin, who was in the battleground, was repeatedly dodging with the pale-faced Zhang Yi beside him. Although Zhang Yi was also an elite Dodi, he was ultimately unable to resist an 8-star Dodi. At this moment, the two of them could only barely dodge the repeated attacks of the formation. During this period of time, Luo Jin had been injured by the light pillars of the formation due to his weaker strength. At this moment, not only was his aura weak, but his body was also swaying as he dodged. If not for Zhang Yi's protection, it was likely that he would have been unable to endure any longer. However, from the looks of the attacks of the formation, Chen Zhen had clearly held back. After all, the person in front of him was the chief of the Yunin Pavilion. No matter how one put it, he was not someone who could be easily killed. Chen Zhen did not doubt that if he were to really kill Luo Jin, it was likely that his refining god sect would be destroyed today, not even tomorrow. Hence, on the whole, Chen Zhen was merely trapping the two of them within the formation. He did not have any intention of killing them. However, at this moment, this was a different situation in Xiao Yan's eyes. Luo Jin was on the verge of death. This caused a fury to once again rise in Xiao Yan's eyes. Even though this was the case, he was unable to truly erupt. However, Xiao Yan's relaxed hand was once again curled up. All of this naturally fell into Gu Yu's eyes. This just treated as me harming Luo Jin. If there is an afterlife, I will definitely use my life to repay him. Xiao Yan bitterly muttered in his heart. Humph. Afterlife? What a great afterlife. You may not care about Luo Jin, but are you going to ignore your ancestor as well? He did everything he could to make you who you are today. Why? Is this how you repay him? Gu Yu once again cried out sternly. At the same time, the emotions in Xiao Yan's heart fluctuated even more after his words sounded. He slowly lifted his lowered head. The fury in his eyes burned even more intensely. The golden light on the King Kong glass body flickered. The dim white heavenly flame gradually rose at this moment. It was just like a towering ancient tree that had been ignited. It was as if the rising flame would spurt out with just a slight provocation, and the entire world would be melted. The greater the emotional fluctuation in Xiao Yan's heart, the happier Guyu within his body was. He had said so much for this. Most of the time, one's potential was developed during an intense battle. However, that was merely the development of one's external potential. In comparison, a powerful heart could allow Xiao Yan to become stronger from the inside out. At this moment, the result that Guyu wanted could be considered to have been achieved. Now all that was left was this final opportunity. As long as the strength in Xiao Yan's heart was unleashed, Guyu believed that the strength that Xiao Yan would unleash this time around would surpass his previous peak. Soon after, before the emotional fluctuation in Xiao Yan's heart could calm down, Guyu opened his mouth once again. Moreover, have you forgotten about your family? Your wife, your children, your father, and your teacher. They are all waiting for the day that you return with great expectations. However, you have chosen to give up when you have just begun. You have abandoned everything. Are you going to abandon them as well? If your family members break through and come here in the future, what will they do when they are similarly faced with life and death? If you give up, it will be equivalent to destroying their hopes. If you do not become stronger, you will never be able to protect your family. No. Guyu's decisive cry had just sounded when the quiet and unmoving Xiao Yan suddenly lifted his head. Xiao Yan, who was like a giant god, suddenly lifted his head in front of everyone's shocked eyes. A hoarse, earth-shaking roar was emitted from his mouth. The roar was like thunder. Although no doqi was poured in, there was still an invisible strength that broke through the wind and clouds. It even blocked the enormous sword that was swiftly descending for an instant. At this moment, a countless number of people felt shocked. Even the sect leaders of the 4 large sects could not help but turn their gazes toward Xiao Yan. In the next moment, Xiao Yan's body, which was covered by a dense white heavenly flame, suddenly shook in front of everyone's shocked eyes. The heavenly flame swiftly spread from under his feet and incinerated the large swords around him. At the same time, Xiao Yan's 2 enormous golden hands were swiftly lifted. His palms collided and his 10 fingers moved together. Numerous complicated seals were swiftly formed by Xiao Yan's hands. The heavenly flame within Xiao Yan's body also surged. Skyfire 3 Mysterious Change. First change. After the thunder-like cry sounded, a cluster of brilliant heavenly flame swiftly rose in front of Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan widened his mouth and swallowed it into his stomach. At the same time, the seals in his hands did not pause. Soon after, a second cry was emitted from Xiao Yan's mouth. Skyfire 3 Mysterious Change. Second change. This time around, the flame that rose in front of Xiao Yan was the D flame, which was ranked first on the heavenly flame ranking. Xiao Yan did not hesitate as he swallowed it. Skyfire 3 Mysterious Change. Third change. Bang! The dense white heavenly flame rose in front of Xiao Yan with a frighteningly high temperature. This was Guyu's bone-chilling flame. With Guyu's actual body in front of him, the bone-chilling flame in front of Xiao Yan was even stronger than the previous 2. At the same time, the strength that Xiao Yan obtained after using it would naturally become incomparably frightening. However, whether he could block this large sword was another matter. Chapter 380. At this moment, Xiao Yan, who was originally trapped by the 4 enormous swords, no longer possessed the dispirited aura from before. Instead, it was replaced by a ruthless aura that resembled that of a demonic beast. His unwillingness and reluctance to part with his loved ones and friends had been completely ignited by Guyu's words. At the same time that Xiao Yan was rapidly executing the Skyfire 3 Mysterious Change, Xiao Yan's mountain-like body was also violently trembling. The violent emotions in his heart caused him to be like an ignited barrel of dynamite. Every time he breathed, the wind and clouds in this region would surge. The instant Xiao Yan swallowed the bone-chilling flame, a berserk aura frantically surged from Xiao Yan's body. Xiao Yan's cultivation also rapidly soared from the level of a 5-star half-martial emperor. In an instant, Xiao Yan's aura had actually broken through the level of an 8-star half-martial emperor and stepped into the level of a 9-star half-martial emperor. Even though this was only a temporary increase in strength, Xiaoyan still could not help but feel a fanaticism. Even though his state of mind was somewhat absent-minded, the fanaticism on Xiaoyan's face grew even denser. In the end, the aura within Xiaoyan's body stopped at the level of a 9-star half-martial emperor. The enormous gap between a half-martial emperor and a Dou emperor was not something that could be bridged by merely using a secret technique. However, the nearly crazy Xiaoyan was clearly not satisfied with this. After attempting to squeeze out the power of the heavenly flame again and again, Xiaoyan finally let out a hoarse roar like that of a demonic beast. At this moment, the Dou Emperor's bloodline in his body suddenly surged. With the addition of his bloodline's power and the Skyfire 3 mysterious change, Xiaoyan's aura finally increased once again. However, compared to earlier, even though Xiaoyan had activated his bloodline's power, he had already crossed the barrier between a half-martial emperor and a Dou emperor. After all, the gap between the two was simply too enormous. Even with the support of his bloodline's power, Xiaoyan's aura was still only that of an advanced 9-star half-martial emperor. Roar! Xiaoyan seemed to be unwilling to give up. He had already used all his methods, but his strength still couldn't reach the level he wanted. This made him even more furious. At the same time, Ling Tian's giant sword came crashing down on Xiaoyan's head. It was already too late for Xiaoyan to make any other moves. Humph. Brat, stop trying to mystify things here. You're just relying on a secret technique. Do you really think you can contend against me? Jianming's expression involuntarily changed when he saw that the aura within Xiaoyan's body had once again become turbulent. However, the difference in their strength was obvious. He was not too concerned about the change in Xiaoyan's strength. From Jianming's point of view, regardless of how Xiaoyan jumped around, he would not be able to escape death. He did not believe that with Xiaoyan's little strength, Xiaoyan would not be able to survive under his Dou technique that caused even an elite Dou Di to tremble in fear. As for resisting, Jianming did not even think about it. Hoo-hoo, the tip of the golden sword came crashing down. The sharp sword aura cut apart the thick white heavenly flame on the surface of Xiaoyan's body, revealing Xiaoyan's body under the heavenly flame. Sensing the sword aura above his head, Xiaoyan raised his head. He felt as though his head was being cut by an invisible strength. An icy cold feeling gradually invaded his heart. Die. Jianming's face was ferocious. The aura of the golden sword became even more frightening under his control. The golden glow that it emitted also became increasingly glaring. Ha! A thunder-like sharp cry sounded. Xiaoyan's large hands were suddenly waved. Both of his arms shook and parted to both sides. The heavenly flame behind him surged out and agglomerated into numerous thick white flame swirls in the empty space around Xiaoyan's body. The flame swirls had just been formed when Xiaoyan immediately waved both of his arms. His large arms carried a hoo-hoo sound of rushing wind. The heavenly flame rose on both of his arms. As the wind blew, the flame flew. Xiaoyan's two arms were like a pair of enormous flame wings. They moved against the wind, giving off a feeling of being towering over the world. At the same time that Xiaoyan's two large palms violently slammed together, the heavenly flame swept out. Numerous thick flame-light pillars suddenly soared into the sky from the flame swirls around him. They met the enormous sword that was descending toward Xiaoyan's head. Ga. You really don't know your limits. You actually dare to receive this D's sword seal. You are really seeking death. The corner of Jianming's mouth was involuntarily lifted into a mocking smile when he saw that Xiaoyan was actually using offense as defense and had no intention of retreating. This sword seal of his had killed an unknown number of elite Dou Di. At this moment, Xiaoyan in front of him, a mere bandit, would not be able to block his sword seal even if he added the various Dou techniques on his body. However, Xiaoyan, who was currently in a furious state, naturally did not have the mood to care whether he could block it or not. He would only do his best to face any battle head-on. Although the aura of the heavenly flame light pillar was not weak, it could not avoid being cut apart under the sharpness of the enormous sword. By the time the heavenly flame disappeared and the energy of the flame light pillar was completely exhausted, the golden glow that covered Ling Tian's enormous sword did not change. Instead, its sharp aura became even more overbearing. Wave after wave of invisible sword aura swept apart. Within this space of the four walls, it formed an even more vast and mighty energy wave that smashed toward Xiao Yan. Roar! A wild and furious beast-like roar shook the sky. Xiao Yan raised his head. A heavenly flame spat out from his pair of flickering golden eyes. With each breath that Xiao Yan took, there would be waves of fire sweeping out from his mouth and nose. Under the golden light, Xiao Yan's face was ferocious. There was an arrogant expression between his brows. Suddenly, Xiao Yan raised both of his palms to his chest. His 10 fingers moved together. Each time his fingertips collided, there would be a circle of invisible energy spreading out, causing the space around Xiao Yan to tremble unceasingly. At the same time, the wild and violent energy that was agglomerated from the heavenly flame within Xiao Yan's body also swiftly gathered in Xiao Yan's palms. Following each breath that Xiao Yan took, everyone in the area could sense the empty space trembling and the land trembling because of it. Ancient. Emperor. Seal. When Xiao Yan spat out these 3 words one by one with a deep tone, a deep aura, like a hidden dragon emerging from the sea, spread out from Xiao Yan's palm. At the same time, a dazzling golden light condensed into a mysterious golden seal in Xiao Yan's broad right palm. It covered Xiao Yan's entire right palm. In the next instant, just as the enormous sword was about to land on Xiao Yan's head, Xiao Yan's right palm suddenly struck out. The golden seal in his hand left his palm and expanded rapidly. Immediately after, the golden seal carried a vast and mighty aura, and violently collided with the enormous sword. Boom! The instant the golden seal and the enormous sword collided, a terrifying Do-Chi wave immediately surged out from the point of collision, reverberating within this narrow space. The enormous sword shook and a terrifying pressure immediately pressed down like Mount Tai. The enormous golden seal also involuntarily sank slightly. Xiao Yan's expression immediately became ugly. Roar! Xiao Yan's entire body shook violently, scattering the Do-Chi wave that was attacking him. At the same time, Do-Chi wildly surged in his palm. His face was ferocious as he forcefully blocked the enormous sword. However, Xiao Yan's actions were destined to not be a long-term solution. Even if he used all his strength, he would definitely not be a match for the sword attack of an elite Do-Di. At this moment, the reason he was able to block this sword was because Jianming had yet to truly use the strength of this sword seal. At this moment, just the strength of this sword sinking and the sword aura that it contained had already caused Xiao Yan to have such a difficult time. It was difficult to imagine whether Xiao Yan would have the chance to block it if the strength of this enormous sword were to truly erupt. Crack! A moment later, a crack line suddenly appeared on the enormous golden seal. The tip of the sword, which was emitting a dazzling golden glow, pierced into it. A frightening, enormous force poured down and Xiao Yan's body, which was suspended in midair, immediately sank significantly. Even the enormous golden seal also began to tremble intensely at this moment. Humph, Xiao Yan, with this little strength of yours, even if I were to give you more secret techniques, they would ultimately be nothing more than empty bravado. They are all talk but no form. At the end of the day, you are still a useless person. Jianming's face involuntarily revealed a surprised expression when he saw that Xiao Yan was actually able to block his sword. However, when that crack line appeared on the golden seal, Jianming's face was once again replaced with a disdainful ridicule. Humph. Alright, I've played enough. Next, I'll let you experience the true power of this emperor's sword seal. After a cold cry was emitted, Jianming waved his 2 fingers. Immediately, the aura on the enormous sword suddenly erupted. A frightening strength instantly pressed down. Xiao Yan's body, which had just stabilized, once again fell uncontrollably. That enormous sword also followed and violently slashed down. Bang! Accompanied by a violent bang, the enormous golden seal in front of Xiao Yan was instantly shattered by the enormous sword. At the same time, Xiao Yan, who was below, couldn't help but immediately spit out a large mouthful of blood. His aura instantly weakened. Die! Xiao Yan's body fell uncontrollably, and the enormous sword followed closely behind. The tip of the sword was aimed at Xiao Yan's chest. The sword wind was sharp and the sword aura surged. Bang! Xiao Yan's body heavily smashed into the ground below. His small mountain-like body smashed into the ground, forming a pit that was dozens of feet deep. Fresh blood sprayed out, and the large sword also fell at this moment. Xiaoyan. Little friend Xiaoyan. Within the formation, Luo Jin and Zhang Yi cried out in shock. Luo Jin's hands, which were stained with his own blood, trembled violently as he clenched them together. His expression was hideous. He did not expect that the few people in front of him would be so daring. In the next moment, when Luo Jin saw the enormous sword tip pierce Xiaoyan's chest, the only thought in his mind was today he must massacre the four sects. Chapter 381. Bang! When Xiaoyan's final punch shattered the huge sword hilt that he was tightly holding in his hand, Xiaoyan's body powerlessly fell backward. Bang! Another bang sounded and the golden light scattered. The King Kong glass body that Xiaoyan was bitterly supporting also scattered at this moment. Xiaoyan's body violently fell from the air, and finally landed at the bottom of the huge deep pit below. If not for the bone-chilling flame protecting his body, it was likely that this fall, in addition to the injuries on Xiaoyan's body, would have been enough to take his life. Tsk. This guy actually shattered that sword. Is he really just a bandit? That is an elite Dodi. How did this fellow do it? He is actually able to shatter the weapon that a Dodi had agglomerated. Tsk. Don't forget the most important thing. Jian Ming, the Sword Emperor, is the chief of one of the four large sects of the western region. His strength has reached the level of an 8-star Dodi. Even in the entire western region, the number of people who can contend with him can be counted with one's fingers. That's right. Xiaoyan is actually able to shatter the weapon that the Sword Emperor had agglomerated. Regardless of whether the Sword Emperor had used his full strength or not, Xiaoyan's name will likely spread throughout the western region after today. Ugh, how unfortunate. Regardless of how strong Xiaoyan is, the chiefs of the four large sects have personally stepped forward today. Even if he had 10 lives, it would not be enough for them to kill him. Becoming famous is merely an illusion. What a pity, what a pity. Various discussions and laments were repeatedly emitted from the crowd outside the battleground. Green Jade City, which had originally become quiet because of the big battle, had once again become noisy because of Xiaoyan's collapse. However, compared to the private conversations of the people outside the battleground, Jian Ming's face was gloomy at this moment. He had never expected that Xiaoyan would actually be so valiant. Xiaoyan had risked his life to break his 6th sword seal. However, it was also because of this that Xiaoyan's actions had aroused the killing intent of the four sect masters. Xiaoyan had repeatedly created miracles that were completely impossible in their eyes. They no longer had the mood to investigate the reason behind this. At this moment, the four elite Dodi only had one thought in their hearts. That was to eliminate Xiaoyan and eliminate all future troubles. Jian Ming, now that things have come to this, could it be that you still want to hold back? An undue delay is fraught with dreams. You should act immediately and kill Xiaoyan to eliminate all future troubles. Chen Zhen's hand under his sleeves suddenly clenched tightly. The 9 heavenly lightning prison formation behind him immediately shot out tens of thousands of dense rays of light. Numerous thick blood-colored thunderbolts soared into the sky. The entire great formation was gradually changed into a strange blood-red color. This was the true form of the 9 heavens lightning prison formation. Chen Zhen, you are really bold. We are the Yunin Pavilion. Once anything happens to our pavilion chief, none of your 4 great sects will be able to survive. Zhang Yi's heart suddenly sank when he saw this scene. He knew that Chen Zhen really intended to kill. Once that happened, it was likely that he and Luo Jin would really be in danger. However, from his point of view, it was nothing if he died. The most important thing was Luo Jin by his side. As an elder of the Yunin Pavilion, Zhang Yi's greatest mission was to ensure Luo Jin's safety. In order to complete this mission, he was even willing to sacrifice his own life. However, Zhang Yi was unwilling to use this method unless he had no other choice. Haha, Elder Zhang Yi, don't be foolish. Didn't the pavilion chief say that as long as Xiaoyan dies, he will destroy our 4 great sects? Since we are going to die either way, why not drag someone down with us? Moreover, using the life of a bandit in exchange for 4 of our Dodis is a great deal for you. Chen Zhen laughed mockingly when he heard this. His old face was filled with a cold expression. A cold glint shot out from his deep old eyes. The killing intent within them was not hidden at all. Humph. Chunjun, do you really dare to kill me? Compared to Zhang Yi by the side, Luo Jin was much calmer at this moment. Luo Jin raised his head with a pale face. His gaze focused on Chunjun as he asked in a deep voice. Humph. Elder Chen narrowed his eyes. He flicked his index finger, and a golden light instantly shot toward Luo Jin's forehead. The latter's body stiffened and immediately became weak. Pavilion Chief. Seeing this scene, Zhang Yi's old face was immediately filled with shock. He bent his body forward and hurriedly supported Luo Jin. Only when he discovered that the latter had merely fainted did he heave a long sigh of relief in his heart. After helping Luo Jin consume a D-tier medicinal pill, he looked at Chunjun with a fierce gaze. However, the latter had already turned his gaze away at this moment. Hehe, Chunjun, looks like that brat guessed correctly. You really don't dare to kill him. Wu Jitian had been observing the situation in the arena. When he saw this, he could not help but quietly laugh at Chunjun. Humph. Even if you had 10 times the courage, would you dare to kill him? Chunjun coldly snorted in response. For the sake of his old life, he did not dare to kill Luo Jin so easily. After all, the latter's identity was too special. Before he had absolute confidence, not only could he not kill Luo Jin even if Luo Jin was about to die, but he also had to save him. As long as he had Luo Jin in his hands, even if the people behind the Yunin Pavilion really came looking for him, he might still have a chance to resist. Otherwise, he would really lose everything. At this moment, Luo Jin had become their protective talisman. As long as they used him to threaten the people from the Yunin Pavilion, they would not dare to do anything to them. When the time came, they just had to force them to swear on the lightning penalty oath and return Luo Jin to them. Hehe, I have been watching this side the whole time. When you knocked him out, I almost made a move. If I had not noticed it in time, I'm afraid that Brat would have had absolute confidence in himself. Seeing Chunjun admit it, Wu Jitian chuckled. Under his seemingly rough smile, there was a wisdom that did not match his appearance at all. In this way, not only could he kill Xiao Yan and obtain the Sky Extinction Steps, but he could also avoid being hunted down by the Yunin Pavilion. It was killing 3 birds with 1 stone, so why not? On the other side, Yi Luotian looked at the scene with a smile on his face. He stroked his beard with one hand, and a pair of bright eyes rolled around in their sockets. An extremely obscure dark light flashed across his deep pupils. Next, there was Jianming. Ever since Jianming heard Chunjun's words, he could not help but recall the time when he was crushed by that mysterious expert. That was a pain that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Even if he spent the rest of his life, he would not be able to erase it. It was also because of this that he did not dare to kill Xiao Yan before he had absolute confidence. However, at this moment, seeing that Luo Jin had been subdued by Chunjun, as one of the 4 great sects, he naturally understood the latter's intentions. With an answer in his heart, he would naturally not have any misgivings when he attacked. Hehehe, Xiao Yan, it must be said that you are the first person this D has seen since I started training to be able to struggle for so long under the continuous attacks of a Do D. However, it is also because of this that the more heaven-defying your ability is, the more this D wants to kill you. This is your fate and also the will of the heavens. Therefore you should obediently die. Jianming's face carried disdain as he looked at Xiao Yan, who was lying in the huge pit. A thought passed through his heart, and hundreds of sharp swords immediately agglomerated in the air. The sword aura surged. Following Jianming's order, the hundreds of swords immediately shot toward Xiao Yan, who was lying in the huge pit below. This time around, Jianming wanted Xiao Yan to die until he could not die. Today, even if the heavens came, Xiao Yan must die in front of him. Swoosh! The hundreds of sharp swords carried a sharp sound of rushing wind as they transformed into numerous rays of light in the empty space. They were like raindrops that filled the sky. In an instant, they had already arrived within 100 feet of Xiao Yan. The invisible sword aura had already left crisscrossing sword scars on the ground around Xiao Yan's body. In the next moment, the long swords had already arrived at Xiao Yan's head. In an instant, Xiao Yan would be completely dead. However, at this moment, a dull yet earth-shaking old voice, which appeared extremely overbearing, suddenly resounded throughout the area. Get lost! Chapter 382. Bang! When Xiao Yan's final punch shattered the huge sword hilt that he was tightly holding in his hand, Xiao Yan's body powerlessly fell backward. Bang! Another bang sounded and the golden light scattered. The King Kong glass body that Xiao Yan was bitterly supporting also scattered at this moment. Xiao Yan's body violently fell from the air, and finally landed at the bottom of the huge deep pit below. If it were not for the bone-chilling flame protecting his body, it was likely that this fall, in addition to the injuries on his body earlier, would have been enough to take Xiao Yan's life. Tsk. This guy actually shattered that sword. Is he really just a bandit? That is a do-di. How did this fellow do it? He is actually able to shatter the weapon that a do-di had agglomerated. Tsk. Don't forget the most important thing. Jianming, the Sword Emperor, is the chief of one of the 4 large sects of the Western region. His strength has reached the level of an 8-star do-di. Even in the entire Western region, the number of people who can contend with him can be counted with one's fingers. That's right. Xiao Yan is actually able to shatter the weapon that the Sword Emperor had agglomerated. Regardless of whether the Sword Emperor had used his full strength, Xiao Yan's name will likely spread throughout the Western region after today. Ugh, what a pity. Regardless of how strong Xiao Yan is, the chiefs of the 4 large sects have personally stepped forward today. Even if he had 10 lives, it would not be enough for them to kill him. Becoming famous is merely an illusion. What a pity, what a pity. Various discussions and laments were repeatedly emitted from the crowd outside the battleground. Green Jade City, which had originally become quiet because of the big battle, had once again become noisy because of Xiao Yan's collapse. However, compared to the private conversations of the people outside the battleground, Jianming's face was gloomy at this moment. He had never expected that Xiao Yan would actually be so valiant. Xiao Yan had risked his life to break his 6th sword seal. However, it was also because of this that Xiao Yan's actions had aroused the killing intent of the 4 sect masters. Xiao Yan had created miracles that were completely impossible in their eyes time and time again. They no longer had the mood to investigate the reason behind this. At this moment, the 4 elite do-di only had one thought in their hearts. That was to eliminate Xiao Yan and eliminate all future troubles. Jianming, now that things have come to this, could it be that you still want to hold back? A long delay is fraught with dreams. You should act immediately and kill Xiao Yan to eliminate all future troubles. Chen Zhen's hand under his sleeves suddenly clenched tightly. The 9 heavenly lightning prison formation behind him immediately shot out tens of thousands of dense rays of light. Numerous thick blood-colored thunderbolts soared into the sky. The entire great formation was gradually changed into a strange blood-red color. This was the true form of the 9 heavens lightning prison formation. Chen Zhen, you are really bold. We are the Yunin Pavilion. Once anything happens to our pavilion chief, none of your 4 great sects will be able to survive. Zhang Yi's heart suddenly sank when he saw this scene. He knew that Chen Zhen really intended to kill. Once that happened, it was likely that he and Luo Jin would really be in danger. However, from his point of view, it was nothing if he died. The most important thing was Luo Jin by his side. As an elder of the Yunin Pavilion, Zhang Yi's greatest mission was to ensure Luo Jin's safety. In order to complete this mission, he was even willing to pay the price with his life. However, Zhang Yi was unwilling to use this method unless he had no other choice. Haha, Elder Zhang Yi, don't be foolish. Didn't the pavilion chief say that as long as Xiao Yan dies, he will destroy our 4 great sects? Since we are going to die either way, why not drag someone down with us? Moreover, using the life of a bandit in exchange for 4 of our do-dis is a great deal for you. Chen Zhen laughed mockingly when he heard this. His old face was filled with a cold expression. A cold glint shot out from his deep old eyes. The killing intent within them was not hidden at all. Humph. Chen Zhen, do you really dare to kill me? Compared to Zhang Yi by the side, Luo Jin was much calmer at this moment. Luo Jin raised his head with a pale face. His gaze focused on Chen Zhen as he asked in a deep voice. Humph. Elder Chen narrowed his eyes. He flicked his index finger, and a golden light instantly shot toward Luo Jin's forehead. The latter's body stiffened and immediately became weak. Pavilion Chief. Seeing this scene, Zhang Yi's old face was immediately filled with shock. He bent his body forward and hurriedly supported Luo Jin. Only when he discovered that the latter had merely fainted did he heave a long sigh of relief in his heart. After helping Luo Jin consume a D-tier medicinal pill, he looked at Chen Zhen with a fierce gaze. However, the latter had already turned his gaze away at this moment. Hee Chen Zhen, looks like that brat guessed correctly. You really don't dare to kill him. Wu Jitian had been observing the situation in the arena. When he saw this, he could not help but quietly laugh at Chen Zhen. Humph, would you dare to kill him even if you had 10 times the courage? Chen Zhen coldly snorted in response. For the sake of his old life, he did not dare to kill Luo Jin so easily. After all, the latter's identity was too special. Before he had absolute confidence, not only could he not kill Luo Jin even if Luo Jin was about to die, but he also had to save him. As long as he had Luo Jin in his hands, even if the people behind the Yunin Pavilion really came looking for him, he might still have a chance to resist. Otherwise, he would really have nothing left. At this moment, Luo Jin had become their protective talisman. As long as they used him to threaten the people from the Yunin Pavilion, they probably would not dare to do anything to them. When the time came, they just had to force them to swear on the lightning penalty oath and return Luo Jin to them. I have been watching this all this time. When you knocked him out, I almost made a move. If I had not noticed it in time, I'm afraid that brat would have absolute confidence. Seeing that Chen Zhen admitted it, Wu Jitian chuckled. Under his seemingly rough smile, there was a wisdom that did not match his appearance at all. In this way, not only could he kill Xiao Yan and obtain the sky extinction steps, but he could also avoid being hunted down by the Yunin Pavilion. It was killing 3 birds with 1 stone, so why not? On the other side, Yi Luotian looked at the scene with a smile on his face. He stroked his beard with one hand, and a pair of bright eyes rolled around in their sockets. An extremely obscure light flashed across his deep pupils. Next, there was Jianming. Ever since Jianming heard Chen Zhen's words, he could not help but recall the time when he was crushed by that mysterious expert. That was the pain of his life. Even if he used his entire life, he would not be able to erase it. It was also because of this that he did not dare to kill Xiao Yan before he had absolute confidence. However, at this moment, seeing that Luo Jin had been subdued by Chen Zhen, as one of the 4 great sects, he naturally understood the latter's intentions. With an answer in his heart, he naturally did not have any misgivings when he attacked. Xiao Yan, it must be said that you are the first person this D has seen since I started training to be able to struggle for so long under the continuous attacks of a Do D. However, it is also because of this that the more heaven-defying your ability is, the more this D wants to kill you. This is your fate and also the will of the heavens. Therefore you should obediently die. Jianming's face carried disdain as he looked at Xiao Yan, who was lying in the huge pit. A thought passed through his heart, and hundreds of sharp swords immediately agglomerated in the air. The sword aura surged. Following Jianming's order, the hundreds of swords immediately shot toward Xiao Yan, who was lying in the huge pit below. This time around, Jianming wanted Xiao Yan to die until he could not die. Today, even if the emperor came, Xiao Yan must die in front of him. Swoosh! The hundreds of sharp swords carried a sharp sound of rushing wind as they turned into numerous rays of light in the empty space. They were like raindrops that filled the sky. In an instant, they had already arrived within 100 feet of Xiao Yan. The invisible sword aura had already left crisscrossing sword scars on the ground around Xiao Yan's body. In the next moment, the long swords had already arrived at Xiao Yan's head. In an instant, Xiao Yan would be completely dead. However, at this moment, a dull yet earth-shaking old voice, which appeared extremely overbearing, suddenly resounded throughout the area. Get lost! Chapter 383. This sudden unexpected change also caused the hearts of Jianming and the others to be startled. However, by the time they recovered, they could only see that the rain of swords that permeated the sky was actually not under Jianming's control, as they swiftly exploded. Bang 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 bang. Within a short couple of breaths' time, the hundreds of swords, which had an overbearing might and were about to kill Xiao Yan, were like balloons that had been inflated and burst. They were swiftly annihilated, transforming into energy light spots that permeated the sky. After which, they slowly disappeared from this world. Such a shocking scene caused a chill to rise within the hearts of everyone present. It was difficult to imagine that the swords that were agglomerated by an elite Dodi had once again been broken. Moreover, compared to Xiao Yan, who had used all of his strength to shatter them earlier, this scene was undoubtedly even more shocking. In an instant, everyone outside the battleground involuntarily began to whisper to each other, causing the atmosphere in the battleground to gradually become a little solemn. Compared to the shock in the hearts of everyone outside, the old face of Jianming, who was the owner of the swords, appeared incomparably solemn. There was no need to say anything. The strength of the person who had attacked was likely at least at the Dodi class. Moreover, based on Jianming's guess, it was likely that the strength of this person was not weaker than any of the four of them at this moment. Damn it, who exactly is this person? Since when did the Western region have an additional elite Dodi whose strength is comparable to ours? Don't tell me. This fellow is someone from the Yunin Pavilion? Immediately, it was not just Jianming. Wu Jitian and the others behind him also swiftly swept their eyes over the surrounding area with solemn gazes. It was as though they wanted to find the person who had attacked. At this moment, Chen Zhen's heart was suddenly greatly shocked. This person was actually able to avoid detection under his powerful spiritual strength as a rank 5 formation master. The strength of this person was likely not something that Chen Zhen and the others could compare with. If he had not intervened to save Xiao Yan earlier, and had instead directly charged at Chen Zhen, it was likely that the current Chen Zhen would have ended up seriously injured. Large amounts of cold sweat involuntarily appeared on Chen Zhen's forehead when he thought of this. Even the clothes on his body were quickly drenched in sweat. At the same time, however, Chen Zhen's old tree root-like finger curled slightly under his sleeves. Doqi agglomerated in his palm. His feet withdrew a little without leaving a trace, and approached the formation behind him. He was already prepared. If the other party was really an expert from the Yunin Pavilion, regardless of what happened today, he must first control Luo Jin in his hands, even if he did not kill Xiao Yan. Only by controlling Luo Jin would he be able to choose a path of survival. After all, if the other party was also a Dodi, he would really be in trouble if Luo Jin was forcefully taken away. May I know who you are? If possible, I would like to invite you to show yourself. At this moment, Wu Jitian, who had the most fiery temperament, was more direct. His body shook as he stood firmly on the ground. His figure was tall and straight as he cupped his fists and cupped them towards the empty sky. His rough voice slowly sounded. As the saying went, one would not slap a smiling face. Now that Wu Jitian was treating him with respect, the unknown powerhouse would naturally not continue to be rude. However, the result was not what Wu Jitian had expected. Not only was it not like it, but it also caused his expression to change. I will now give you two choices. First, leave these three behind and leave immediately. I can treat it as if nothing has happened. Second, the three of them will still stay behind. At the same time, the four of you will also stay here forever. The aged voice sounded extremely calm, but within that calmness, there was an incomparably domineering majesty. Under this imposing manner, no one could go against it. Humph. A coward who hides his head but only shows his tail actually dares to boast so shamelessly. This D wants to see where you get the courage to say such words. Wu Jitian was furious when he heard this. His body shook and his two large hands suddenly clenched into fists. The aura of his entire body shook, and the doqi in his body swiftly surged out. The shoulder armor on his left chest began to wiggle as if it was alive. However, just as Wu Jitian's aura was about to erupt, a thunder-like sound was suddenly emitted from the sky. Bang! In merely an instant, when everyone present heard the sound, everyone in Green Jade City saw Wu Jitian's bear-like strong body being sent flying by an invisible strength without any forewarning. Grug! Wu Jitian's body violently fell to the ground. Only then did his mouth involuntarily spit out a large mouthful of fresh blood. His originally sleek red face swiftly turned pale. The aura of his body had also weakened greatly at this moment. This is the first time. I also hope that this will be the last time. I have given all of you a chance. Get lost. By the time everyone recovered, the faint old voice had once again reverberated in the sky above Green Jade City. It reverberated for a long time. Only at this moment did Chen Zhen, Jianming, Yi Luotian, and Wu Jitian, who had been sent flying earlier, completely recover from the shock in their hearts. Even the 4 elite Dodi, who possessed a high position in the western region, had an endless amount of fear lingering in their hearts at this moment. They were certain that the strength of this mysterious expert had already surpassed the level of a Dodi. It was likely that he was at least at the origin transformation realm. The bodies of Chunjun and the other 3 involuntarily trembled intensely when they thought of this. The shock in their hearts was difficult to describe. Origin transformation expert. Even in the entire Yuanwu continent, an expert of this level would be an extremely powerful existence with an extremely high status. This point could be seen just by looking at Tianju. Ugh, the elder, we did not intend to offend you. It is just that we were a little anxious earlier. That is why we have angered elder. Ugh, elder, please do not take offense. Wu Jitian's face was filled with fear as he stood up with difficulty. Although the force in his body was not very strong, that attack had caused quite a serious injury to his physical body. It was likely that he would not be able to recover for a long time. In that case, why aren't all of you getting lost? The old low cry suddenly sounded. It was like a sudden clap of thunder that shook Wu Jitian and the others until they felt dizzy. There was no need to even mention the ordinary cultivators standing outside the arena. Hearing this, the 4 of them exchanged glances with each other. Chen Zhen's eyes vaguely glanced behind him. Zhang Yi was wholeheartedly guarding Luojin. Although he knew that someone had come to save him, he did not move. No matter what, he had to prioritize Luojin's safety. Seeing that Zhang Yi was guarding Luojin, Chen Zhen could not help but secretly frown. In this way, it would be impossible for him to take down Luojin immediately. Once he took action, the mysterious expert would probably leave him here forever, just as he had said. However, if he did not take action now, once the faction behind Yunin Pavilion learned of this matter, they would likely not let the matter rest. Put away your thoughts and get lost. Otherwise, I will take care of you right now. A thunderous sound entered Chen Zhen's ears, causing his body to tremble violently. When he recovered, he hurriedly cupped his hands towards the sky and shouted in a trembling voice, Brother Chenjun, Brother Chenjun, Brother Chenjun. I will get lost now. I will get lost now. I will get lost now. Before he finished speaking, Chenjun hurriedly turned around and flew out of Emerald City as if he was fleeing for his life. Behind him, Wu Jitian and the others cupped their hands towards the sky and retreated. Then they quickly flew in 4 different directions. Chapter 384. Elder, thank you for saving us. Seeing that Chen Zhen and the rest had fled, Zhang Yi, who was standing guard beside Luojin, looked respectfully at the empty sky above his head and said in a weak and respectful voice after a long while, There is nothing to thank me for. I just couldn't stand it, so I intervened. The old voice was still very calm. However, if one were to listen carefully, one would discover that the tone of this mysterious strong person was much gentler than when he was speaking to Chen Zhen and the others. This caused Zhang Yi to feel comfortable in his heart. At the same time, he could not help but be curious about this mysterious strong person. Who exactly was this mysterious strong person? Elder. I am an elder of the Yunin Pavilion. The young man beside me is the pavilion master of the Yunin Pavilion. Since Elder has saved us this time, I would like to invite Elder to be a guest at the Yunin Pavilion. At the same time, I would like to take some things to repay Elder for saving our lives. Zhang Yi rolled his eyes. He was afraid that those 4 fellows would be unwilling to give up and lay low outside the city. If they waited for this elder to leave, Xiao Yan and the others would not be able to escape death. There is no need to worry. They have already returned to their respective sections. It is impossible for them to be lying low outside the city. As for the Yunin Pavilion, the old me still has something to do. I will not be going. Seemingly having seen through the worry in Zhang Yi's heart, the old man's faint laughter was once again emitted. This caused Zhang Yi's heart to relax. At the same time, his old face could not help but reveal a somewhat embarrassed smile. Cough, cough. Just as the atmosphere was a little quiet, a few weak coughs suddenly sounded. Only at this moment did Zhang Yi react. Although Luo Jin's injuries had stabilized, on the other hand, Xiao Yan's condition was still difficult to determine. After all, Xiao Yan's chest had been pierced by the sword of a Dodi while he was seriously injured. Adding the ferocious energy explosion that followed, Xiao Yan's injuries could not be any more serious. He needed to hurry over and take a look. All right, you do what you need to do. The old me will take my leave first. As the faint and aged voice sounded out, the special pressure that permeated the entire emerald green city a moment ago also quietly disappeared. Everyone in the city also suddenly felt their bodies become lighter at this moment, and they were finally able to completely relax. Only Zhang Yi didn't dare to relax. He hurriedly cupped his hands towards the sky, then dragged his injured body and quickly flew to Xiao Yan's side. Even with Zhang Yi's mental fortitude, his heart could not help but tremble when he saw the terrifying sword wound on Xiao Yan's chest that almost tore him apart. It was hard to imagine that Xiao Yan had forcefully shattered the huge energy sword that Jian Ming had condensed while enduring such serious injuries. When Zhang Yi's spiritual strength swept over the other parts of Xiao Yan's body, the expression on his old face involuntarily became ugly. It was not just the nearly fatal sword wound on his chest. Over half of the bones in Xiao Yan's body had been shattered. At the same time, the internal organs in Xiao Yan's body had also suffered different degrees of damage. Nearly half of the meridians in his body had been broken. Even the blood flowing in his blood vessels was almost completely depleted. With Xiao Yan's current condition, it was likely that even an ordinary person would be able to kill him. However, at the same time, there were two other things that caused Zhang Yi's heart to be extremely surprised. Firstly, when Zhang Yi checked Xiao Yan's injuries, he discovered that Xiao Yan had already consumed a top-notch emperor-grade pill to heal his injuries. Zhang Yi carefully recalled the scene of Xiao Yan's previous battle. He did not have any time to consume the pill, and Zhang Yi did not see Xiao Yan consume the pill. If that was the case, then who had consumed the pill for Xiao Yan? Secondly, in addition to the pill, Xiao Yan's body actually emitted several types of heavenly flames that separately healed Xiao Yan's body and soul. This caused Zhang Yi to involuntarily feel envious. By the time Zhang Yi controlled Xiao Yan's and Luo Jin's seriously injured bodies and returned to the Hidden Cloud Pavilion, Lungchui City, which had been completely destroyed, had become lively. Within a short period of time, the name Xiao Yan had been firmly engraved in the hearts of every person in Green Jade City. Even the Ban Di realm experts' faces were filled with shock as they recalled the previous big battle. Their hearts were filled with shock. Although Xiao Yan had not gained the upper hand in the previous big battle, the fact that he had survived the attack of a Do Di was enough to cause them to be emotionally moved. Using the body of a Ban Di to fight against a Do Di. How many people in the entire continent could achieve this kind of heroism? At the very least, the other people present did not have Xiao Yan's courage and ability to face a Do Di, much less exchange blows with one. Within a short few days, news of Xiao Yan's big battle spread not only in Green Jade City, but also in over 10 cities of various sizes in the Shilin region. In an instant, Xiao Yan's name had left an extremely deep impression in the hearts of most people in the western region. At the same time, Xiao Yan had also become the target of many people. Even some Ban Di realm experts who boasted of their strength had begun to search for Xiao Yan all over the western region. Although they did not dare to say that they would face a Do Di, being able to defeat this man who had survived the attack of a Do Di could be considered a great achievement for them. Of course, in the eyes of those female cultivators, it was a different story. While Xiao Yan's fame had brought him countless pursuers, the eyes of those young and beautiful ladies were filled with admiration. There were even some who had fought because of him, causing Xiao Yan's fame to soar rapidly within a short period of time. Since ancient times, beauties loved heroes. Perhaps this was the exact description of Xiao Yan at this moment. However, while the outside world was abuzz with news of Xiao Yan's big battle, the current Xiao Yan was still unconscious. His face was as white as snow and there were no signs of him waking up. If it were not for the weak breath in his nose, it was likely that even Zhang Yi would not dare to guarantee that Xiao Yan was still alive. Xiao Yan had suffered quite a lot of injuries in this big battle. This was especially the case when Jian Ming's sword seal had nearly taken his life. If it were not for the heavenly flame, a heaven-defying item, protecting Xiao Yan's essence from being harmed, it was likely that his strength would not have improved even if he was lucky enough to survive. Time flashed by and a month had quietly passed. Luo Jin had already recovered. Although he had yet to recover to his peak condition, it was only a matter of time. The first thing Luo Jin did after recovering was to find Elder Luo from the southern region and ask him to exterminate the four sections. This was also the decision Luo Jin had made during the big battle that day. Because of Xiao Yan, he had to make the four sects pay the price. Unfortunately, even though Luo Jin had indeed invited Elder Luo, the final outcome was not what Luo Jin had expected. Elder Luo did not exterminate the four sections. Instead, he severely reprimanded Luo Jin. Under Luo Jin's somewhat aggrieved gaze, Luo Ao's face was solemn the entire time as he looked at Xiao Yan. The latter's injury was so deep that even he could not help but break out in a cold sweat. At the same time, Luo Ao also rejoiced on behalf of Xiao Yan. At such a time, what could save Xiao Yan was not the emperor-grade pills, but the heavenly flame in Xiao Yan's body. Afterwards, Luo Ao stayed in Emerald Green City for 2 months. However, other than the gradual recovery of Xiao Yan's aura, there were no other changes. 2 months later, Luo Ao, who had originally planned to patiently wait for Xiao Yan to awaken, was forced to immediately return to the southern region because of a sudden piece of news. When he left Emerald Green City, Luo Jin clearly saw the extremely grave expression on his old face. Luo Ao's expression immediately made Luo Jin feel uneasy. He had not seen such an expression on Luo Ao's face many times. The reason why Luo Ao had so quickly returned to the southern region with such a grave expression was because something had happened to the Ginseng spiritual tribe. In the letter that Luo Ao had received from Qingmu, Qingmu had mentioned that when he had entered the depths of the Ginseng spiritual space, he had discovered something that should not have existed. It was because of this that Qingmu and Luo Ao had been so nervous. It was a small piece of pitch-black crystal that looked like charcoal. Its shape was somewhat uneven, as if it had fallen from something. Under Qingmu's probing, he even detected an extremely familiar aura from it. And this was the reason why his expression had changed upon hearing it. This aura came from He Mu, who had been killed by Xiao Yan. This small piece of charcoal-like crystal was a small piece of He Mu's ginseng spiritual root. Chapter 385. Western Region, Lungsue City. Inside the Yunin Pavilion. Half a year had passed since that big battle. During this half a year, Xiao Yan had been in a slumber. Although the injuries on his body had already recovered by 90%, Xiao Yan still did not show any signs of waking up. In the Yunin Pavilion, Luo Jin and Zhang Yi frowned as they looked at Xiao Yan, who was lying on a special stone bed. Their eyes revealed a hint of worry. They did not expect Xiao Yan to be so seriously injured this time. Half a year had passed, but he showed no signs of waking up. They did not know how long he would remain in this state. In this half a year, Elder Luo had gone back and forth many times. However, every time he saw Xiao Yan in this state, he could only shake his head helplessly. After observing him for a few days, he returned to the southern region. Following Xiao Yan's deep sleep, the news about Xiao Yan in the outside world gradually calmed down. There were even many people who thought that perhaps after the great battle, Xiao Yan's injuries were too serious and could not be cured. As this new news spread, it immediately caused a commotion in the western region. Most people were certain of this answer. After all, a Dodi was a Dodi. How could a mere half-martial emperor fight against him so easily? Moreover, Xiao Yan was only a 5-star half-martial emperor. This was even more unreasonable. Of course, there were also some people who still believed that Xiao Yan was still alive. However, in comparison, these people were much fewer. After all, theoretically speaking, the above explanation was not wrong. However, they still thought that perhaps Xiao Yan was not dead and had only left the western region. Of course, these were not important. What was important was that all news about Xiao Yan had disappeared with the wind in this vast western region. However, it seemed that there were always some people who did not want Xiao Yan's name to fade away. Of course, more of them had other intentions. After Xiao Yan's deep sleep for half a year, the western region, which had gradually calmed down, suddenly spread another shocking news. Once this news spread, Xiao Yan's name once again resounded in the western region. If anyone sees Xiao Yan and reports the location of his appearance or captures him alive, as long as he is still alive and is brought to any of the 4 large sects, the 4 large sects will give a reward. One of the rewards included was 12 emperor-grade medicinal pills. As for the other rewards, There was no lack of cultivation methods or dough skills. They were all shocking treasures that would make people go crazy. Although they did not know whether the news was true or false, when the crowd saw that the four great sects did not give a definite response, everyone immediately understood. Therefore, the Western region, which had just calmed down not long ago, was once again in turmoil. Xiao Yan's name once again resounded in every corner of the Western region. As if to ensure that someone would be able to find Xiao Yan, after this news spread, many pieces of paper with Xiao Yan's face swiftly flew out from unknown corners. This also allowed everyone to have a clear understanding of Xiao Yan's appearance. Of course, although this was the case, these pieces of paper were only passed around in some of the larger cities. As for some of the smaller towns and cities, no one paid any attention to them. As for Lungchui City, it was the largest city in the southwestern border. It was also a large city with a teleportation formation. However, not a single piece of news related to Xiao Yan was transmitted from this place. This was because this place was the territory of the Hidden Cloud Pavilion. Even the four large sects were blacklisted in this place. How could news of Xiao Yan be transmitted to this place? Young master, the Shilin region has been in turmoil recently. After the two of them left the pavilion, Zhang Yi frowned and said softly to Luo Jin. As Xiao Yan was injured and needed to recuperate, the Yunin Pavilion had already announced its closure half a year ago. Hence, other than Xiao Yan in the pavilion, there was no one on the other 5 floors of the Yunin Pavilion. There was no need to worry about outsiders when they spoke. The 4 great sects, these fellows still haven't given up. Even now, they're still thinking about the sky extinction step. If it weren't for the fact that 5th grandfather forbade me from sending people, I would have destroyed all of you long ago. When the 4 great sects were mentioned, Luo Jin immediately felt a deep chill in his heart. Now that half a year had passed, although the injuries on his body had already healed, the killing intent in his heart towards the 4 great sects had gradually deepened. Especially now that Xiao Yan was still in a coma, this only increased Luo Jin's killing intent. However, due to Luo Ao, there was nothing he could do. Even if the 4 great sects were openly hunting down Xiao Yan, there was nothing he could do. Luo Jin understood that it wasn't that Luo Ao couldn't destroy the 4 great sects, but that he didn't want Luo Jin to always live under his protection. What Luo Ao wanted to see was Luo Jin's own growth. He wanted Luo Jin to have his own pursuits and goals. If it had been in the past, when Luo Jin wandered around and obtained what he needed with his own strength, Luo Ao might have praised him. However, ever since Luo Ao met Xiao Yan, his attitude towards disciplining this junior of his had changed. Xiao Yan's fighting spirit was something that was rarely displayed by people from the younger generation like them. Of course, it was not that there were none who were similar. However, most of them were weak and their hearts were filled with arrogance, but they did not have the strength to back it up. They appeared to be disciplined, but they were unable to show it. If they were placed in a true big battle, they would at the very most be able to endure for a short while, and would not be able to last for long. However, Xiao Yan was different. What made him different was that he had strength and the will to fight. Moreover, he had also successfully survived the big battle. Regardless of whether this was luck or not, Xiao Yan had indeed survived. This point was already sufficient. Moreover, from a certain point of view, luck was also one of the aspects of success. After regaining his senses, Luo Jin stared fiercely at the space in front of him, killing intent surging in his eyes. In addition, I've received news that the Cloud Immortal sect in the southern region has also withdrawn the people guarding there. The border of the southern region is already empty. Zhang Yi looked at Luo Jin in front of him, a gratified look in the depths of his old eyes. How could he not know what his own ancestor meant? As Luo Jin's guardian, he naturally felt gratified when he saw Luo Jin's appearance. SSS, the Cloud Immortal sect? Even they have withdrawn? In that case, the Ghost Hall in the southern region has been abolished. Otherwise, they wouldn't have withdrawn in full force. Luo Jin exclaimed in surprise. Then he analyzed in a low voice. Yes. In addition, not long ago, our men discovered that they had met an elder of the Cloud Immortal sect through the teleportation array. Zhang Yi followed beside Luo Jin. As they descended the stairs, he deliberated as he spoke. Oh. An elder of the Cloud Immortal sect? How why? After we left the southern region, they couldn't sit still anymore. Not only did they abandon their territory, but they also joined the western region in the muddy waters. Are they trying to fish in troubled waters? Luo Jin raised his eyebrows slightly, a look of surprise on his face. The news that he had received recently was all about the southern region. He did not expect that these people would immediately take action after Xiao Yan left the southern region. It seemed that there was more to this than meets the eye. No, I think that the reason for his trip is not because he was ordered by the Cloud Immortal sect, but because he has other motives. Hearing this, Zhang Yi frowned and rubbed his fingers together as he spoke softly. What do you mean? Luo Jin turned his head to look at Zhang Yi and asked softly, Young master, do you remember that our young friend Xiao Yan has a skill that allows him to summon an avatar that is almost as powerful as his actual body? That skill was obtained from an elder of the Cloud Immortal sect. Hiss, you mean Yuan Qing from the Cloud Immortal sect? Luo Jin was stunned. Then he could not help but exclaim in surprise. If that was the case, Yuan Qing's motive was likely to be Xiao Yan. He had heard that Xiao Yan was in the western region, so he had taken advantage of the retreat to go to the western region alone to look for Xiao Yan. Boom. However, just as Luo Jin was about to cry out in shock, a violent explosion suddenly sounded from the attic upstairs. In the next instant, Luo Jin, who was walking downstairs, suddenly turned around. At the same time, Zhang Yi, who was behind him, also turned around at the same time. They both lifted their heads and looked at the attic on the 6th floor. Their eyes were filled with joy and excitement. At the same time, in the attic on the 6th floor, Xiao Yan, whose eyes were originally closed and whose body was burning with the star flame, had already sat up. The heavenly fire entered his body, and his aura was as powerful as a soaring dragon. Sensing the familiar aura from upstairs, Luo Jin and Zhang Yi could not help but exclaim in surprise. Xiao Yan, you're awake. Chapter 386. On the 6th floor of the Hidden Cloud Pavilion. At this moment, 3 figures were seated in order. Luo Jin and Zhang Yi were among them. However, at this moment, their faces were filled with joy as they looked at the young man in black robes in front of them. This person was none other than Xiao Yan, who had been unconscious for half a year, and had only just woken up. Haha, brother Xiao Yan, you have finally woken up after half a year. Luo Jin couldn't help but laugh at Xiao Yan as soon as he sat down. Xiao Yan's awakening seemed to have swept away all the unhappiness he had in the past half a year. The killing intent he had for the 4 great sects was also suppressed at the bottom of his heart with Xiao Yan's awakening. Hearing this, Xiao Yan sighed and nodded his head. He inhaled a deep breath of air, and his heart also relaxed slightly. During this half a year of deep sleep, Xiao Yan seemed to have dreamed of many things. He dreamed of the Doqi continent, of his family and friends. He seemed to have returned there, and lived happily with Sun Er and Kai Lin. His father and teacher were always by his side. He had a large number of children, and his family was prosperous. Everyone who saw him had reverence in their eyes. Xiao Yan was like a god, so high and unapproachable. But every time he saw this, Xiao Yan couldn't help but frown. Xiao Yan used his powerful strength to protect the clan, and everything seemed so beautiful. However, this sweet life, which seemed to have been sweetened with sugar, made Xiao Yan feel extremely uncomfortable. There seemed to be something missing here. Finally, one day, when Xiao Yan was feeling impatient, a group of mysterious black-robed people broke through the void and descended on the Doqi continent. After an earth-shaking battle, Xiao Yan was defeated in the end. The moment he was defeated by the black-robed people, Xiao Yan's face was full of shock. He didn't dare to believe that he was defeated so thoroughly. He was a Do Di, the strongest person in the Doqi continent. How could he be defeated? Half Di Do Di. However, the moment he thought of this point, a thought suddenly surged out from deep within his heart, causing him to instantly recover. Even though this was the case, Xiao Yan was unable to sort out the chaotic thoughts in his mind within a short period of time. Instead, the more anxious Xiao Yan was, the more chaotic the thoughts in his mind became. As the saying goes, the winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. While Xiao Yan was having a headache because of the thoughts in his heart, the entire continent was gradually heading toward destruction because of Xiao Yan's defeat. Under the devil's claws of the black-robed people, the originally peaceful continent began to be on the verge of destruction. Even someone as strong as a Do Sheng could only be annihilated. Xiao Yan's heart became increasingly heavy as he watched his loved ones die one by one. His thin body swayed repeatedly in the wild wind. Blood tears continued to swirl in his eyes. His hands, which were stained with his own blood, were tightly clenched together with extreme unwillingness. His delicate fingertips had almost pierced into his palm, but Xiaoyan did not feel any pain. He could only stubbornly widen his scarlet eyes and stare intently at those black-robed people. Each time he made a move, he would be mercilessly destroyed by their strength. When Xiaoyan finally saw his father and teacher die under the devil's claws of the black-robed people, Xiaoyan was heartbroken. He struggled with all his might, wanting to save his father and teacher. However, the end result was an even more cold-blooded destruction. His father and teacher also failed to escape the tragic fate of death. In the end, Xiaoyan personally saw Sun Er and Kai Lin being killed by the black-robed people, and turned into nothingness. Sun Er and Kai Lin's deaths seemed to have become a key that instantly unraveled the extremely chaotic thoughts in Xiaoyan's mind. All the doubts in Xiaoyan's heart were easily resolved at this moment. The only thing that was missing was the hot-bloodedness in the hearts of the people on the Doqi continent, and the fanatical pursuit of strength. None of these things were present in them. The eyes that they used to look at him were not filled with respect. Instead, they were filled with fear. A kind of fear without any courage. Only at this moment did Xiaoyan wake up. All of this was merely a dream. However, this caused Xiaoyan's entire body to become ice cold. At the same time, Xiaoyan also woke up from his long slumber. Brother Xiaoyan? Brother Xiaoyan? Yes. Suddenly, Xiaoyan clearly felt that there was someone patting his shoulder. Due to the stimulation that Xiaoyan had received in the dream earlier, the first action that Xiaoyan took when he recovered was to throw out a palm with the back of his hand. Fortunately, Xiaoyan reacted in time the moment his palm was about to land on Luo Jin's face. Only then did Xiaoyan abruptly stop his attack. When the strong wind hit Luo Jin's face, the latter's expression changed drastically. His body staggered and involuntarily fell backward. Finally, he was supported by Zhang Yi, who also had an expression of disbelief on his face. Only then did he not miserably fall to the ground. Young friend Xiaoyan Yu. Sorry, I was a little emotional just now. Just as Zhang Yi was about to involuntarily open his mouth to ask, Xiaoyan hurriedly apologized. Seeing Xiaoyan's expression, Zhang Yi and Luo Jin, who still had a lingering fear in his heart, looked at each other. Immediately, they sighed in confusion before returning to their seats. Haha, brother Xiaoyan, you really made us wait for half a year. Knowing that Xiaoyan was unwilling to talk about this topic, Luo Jin did not continue the topic. Instead, he changed the topic and talked about Xiaoyan. Hearing Luo Jin's words, Xiaoyan smiled helplessly. He did not expect that he would be unconscious for so long due to his injury. Oh right, brother Xiaoyan, have you seen that senior? Luo Jin seemed to have thought of something as he asked Xiaoyan with a smile. Senior? What senior? Xiaoyan's expression was startled when he heard this. He asked doubtfully without knowing anything. Luo Jin and Zhang Yi by the side looked at each other in response. Then they laughed involuntarily. Haha, looks like you are completely unaware of the result of the big battle half a year ago. In that case, I'm afraid that we will not be able to find that mysterious senior. Luo Jin shook his head and sighed. He was also very curious about the senior that Zhang Yi had mentioned. Regardless of the other party's strength, at the very least, he had saved the three of them. Just this location alone was sufficient for Luo Jin to treat him with respect. Xiaoyan involuntarily frowned when he heard this. He thought for a moment in his heart before he recalled the big battle half a year ago. He remembered that he seemed to have lost consciousness at the end of the big battle. He only vaguely remembered that he had broken Jian Ming's sword seal. As for what happened after that, he was completely unaware. After Luo Jin's explanation, Xiaoyan suddenly had a little understanding of that mysterious senior. However, Xiaoyan did not explain it clearly. Hee. At this moment, a mocking laughter was emitted from deep within Xiaoyan's body. It was Guyu. Chapter 387. Xiaoyan's awakening made Luo Jin excited and happy. At the same time, his spirit also became lively. Xiaoyan's face was also filled with joy. as if he had survived a disaster. Being able to escape from such a dream made Xiao Yin feel as if he had escaped death. Under the influence of different emotions, the two of them were like old friends who had not seen each other for many years. They chatted for an entire day, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. When the sky turned dark, the two of them did not forget to drink to their heart's content. It was not until dawn the next day that they finished drinking. Although Xiao Yin and Luo Jin were both half-emperors, the two of them were close friends. They did not purposely dissolve the alcohol in the wine. Instead, they allowed the alcohol in the wine to wreak havoc in their bodies. Therefore, after drinking for an entire night, the two of them were already red all over. Their bodies were lying on the ground haphazardly. As they breathed, the entire pavilion was filled with a strong smell of alcohol. The smell of alcohol was so strong that it even turned into a faint green fog, which was unbearable. However, the two of them were completely unaware of this. As their breathing gradually became steady and orderly, the two half-emperors, who were famous in the outside world, fell into a deep sleep. Zhang Yi was also helpless about this. He could only shake his head and leave the 6th floor, which was filled with a foul atmosphere. A few days later, in Longsue City, an old man with an ordinary aura and an aged face stood in front of the Yunin Pavilion. When the pedestrians on the street saw this old man, they could not help but frown slightly. The Yunin Pavilion had been closed for half a year, and the words "temporarily closed" were clearly written on the door. Why was this strange old man standing here? However, when the pedestrians saw Zhang Yi come out of the Yunin Pavilion and respectfully welcome this old man into the Yunin Pavilion, the expressions of the pedestrians on the street instantly froze. Their mouths were wide open, and they stood there like statues, not saying a word for a long time. At the same time, in the Yunin Pavilion, Luo Ao finally saw Xiao Yin again. That's right, this seemingly powerless old man was Luo Ao. When Luo Ao saw Xiao Yin for the first time, the worry he had for Xiao Yin finally dissipated. Before this, even he did not dare to guarantee that Xiao Yin would wake up. After all, Xiao Yan's injuries this time were too serious. Fortunately, the heavens favored Xiao Yin. Even though Xiao Yin was seriously injured, he was still able to avoid a calamity and successfully awaken. While Luo Ao and Xiao Yin met, the latter's heart was similarly filled with excitement. Xiao Yin respected Luo Ao from the bottom of his heart. This was not only because Luo Ao was his elder, but also because of the care and concern Luo Ao had shown him over the past 2 years. Haha, kid, this old man believed that you wouldn't die so easily. It seems that my premonition was not wrong. Luo Ao immediately laughed out loud and spoke when he saw Xiao Yin bowing and cupping his hands to him. Haha. This junior has learned from brother Luo Jin about some of the things that have happened in the past 6 months. This junior would like to thank senior for his concern over the past 6 months. Xiao Yin cupped his hands at Luo Ao and said respectfully with a smile. Haha, that's enough. We are not outsiders, so there's no need to be so polite. Let's sit down first. Whatever you have to say can wait until we're seated. Seeing Luo Ao and Xiao Yin being so polite to each other, Luo Jin was not used to it. He could only smile helplessly and say to the two of them in unison. When they heard this, they looked at each other and smiled. They did not stand on ceremony, and each found a seat to sit down. Although the attic on the 6th floor was relatively smaller than the other floors, it was much more spacious for the 4 of them. Therefore, the atmosphere in the room did not become oppressive because of the short silence. After everyone took their seats, Xiao Yin raised his head and looked at the others with a smile. Haha, kid, you've worried us a lot during the past 6 months that you've been asleep. As soon as they sat down, Luo Ao immediately laughed and said in a joking tone. Xiao Yin nodded when he heard this. He was naturally very clear about this. He immediately stood up again and cupped his hands at the people in front of him. Xiao Yin is here. Thank you very much. Haha, alright. Why are you so polite? Do you think that we treat you as an outsider? Let's not talk about anything else. Let's talk about the most important thing right now. When he saw Xiao Yin stand up, Luo Ao immediately frowned and said in a somewhat unhappy tone. Then, he changed the topic and once again focused on Xiao Yin. When Xiao Yin saw this, he nodded awkwardly and smiled embarrassedly. Then he sat down again. When Xiao Yin sat down, Luo Ao's gaze swept across the few people present, and finally landed on Xiao Yan. His expression gradually returned to normal and he said, Xiao Yan, what's your attitude towards the 4 great sects? If I can kill them, I will not show any mercy. When he heard this, Xiao Yan was startled at first. Then his eyes gradually became fierce. The heavenly fire in the depths of his pupils surged as he said in a low voice. Seeing this, Elder Luo could not help but frown slightly. Too much resentment was not a good thing. If one day Xiao Yan lost his rationality, he would probably end up harming himself as a result. Frowning, Luo Ao's mind spun rapidly. After a long time, he once again spoke in a serious tone. All right, since that's the case, please answer a few questions of this old man first. Senior, please speak. Xiao Yan slowly regained his calm and said respectfully. Seeing this, Luo Ao was slightly shocked. He quickly calmed his mind and hesitated for a moment before speaking. Xiao Yan, what do you think about the big battle half a year ago with your current strength? Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows and thought for a moment. Then he frowned and said in a serious tone. Those 4 sect leaders were indeed very strong. The current me is still no match for them. Although these words were concise and had the intention of boosting others' morale, Luo Ao nodded slightly after hearing them. The truth was as such. Xiao Yan was indeed no match for them. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was no match for them. After all, even in the great battle half a year ago, none of the 4 of them had used their true strength. That kind of method could be considered embarrassing for them, Dodi. However, the thing that caused Luo Ao to nod his head was Xiao Yan's now. Xiao Yan was right. The current him was indeed no match for any of the 4 sect leaders. However, this did not include the future. With Xiao Yan's current training speed, as long as nothing unexpected happened, his future achievements would only be higher than the 4 of them. This was Luo Ao's inference from the bottom of his heart. It was also the confidence he had in Xiao Yan. Not bad. Although it was a little short, it was concise and comprehensive. This is already sufficient. Luo Ao nodded. His tone was calm as he spoke. Immediately, he changed the topic and continued to ask. Then how strong do you think the 4 of them are? Yes, this time around Xiao Yan hesitated for a moment. It was a long while later before he once again opened his mouth and said. The 4 of them are all Do-D experts. They have advanced to the Do-D class for many years, and rarely have any opponents within the Do-D class. However, it is precisely because they have been stuck at their current level for too long that it will be difficult for them to advance, even an inch in the future. It is likely that they can only remain at this level for the rest of their lives. Therefore, although they are very strong, there are people who are even stronger than them. As long as one surpasses the Do-D class, anyone can easily kill them. Luo Ao once again smiled and nodded. This was the result he wanted. He wanted Xiao Yan to tell himself that if he wanted to kill the sect leaders of the 4 large sects, he must first surpass the Do-D class as a warning. This was to prevent Xiao Yan from doing something crazy in a moment of impulse. Cuckoo, thank you Elder for your guidance. Elder, please rest assured that this junior will definitely not do anything crazy. At the very least, before I possess the strength to fight equally with them, I will not have a head-on conflict with them. Suddenly, Xiao Yan's respectful words once again sounded. Luo Ao immediately smiled. He stroked his beard with one hand and repeatedly nodded with a smile. Good. Little fellow, it seems that this old man has worried too much for you to have this little awareness. In comparison, this little ancestor of ours who always thinks of relying on our elders is really a little brat who will never grow up. At the end of his words, Luo Ao even parted his mouth and glanced at Luo Jin by the side. The words from his mouth caused the latter to continuously pout his mouth. He helplessly turned his head away. At the same time, he could not help but quietly mutter in his heart. This caused Luo Ao to laugh out loud. Chapter 388. The night sky was like a black curtain that silently enveloped the sky above Emerald Green City. The silvery fragmentary stars adorned the empty sky. A bright moon hung high in the sky, sprinkling a snowy glow that illuminated the entire Emerald Green City in the dark night. Xiao Yan and the others sat in the Union Pavilion, occasionally chatting and laughing. The atmosphere was relaxed and pleasant. Suddenly, Luo Ao, who was chatting, seemed to have thought of something. His relaxed eyebrows suddenly wrinkled slightly, and he immediately looked up at Xiao Yan. Seeing Luo Ao's strange look, Xiao Yan could not help but be slightly startled. Then he smiled slightly and said to Luo Ao, "Elder Luo, do you have something to say to me? If you do, don't be shy. Just say it." Hearing this, Elder Luo frowned slightly and nodded. He signaled Zhang Yi with his eyes. Zhang Yi immediately understood and nodded. His body wriggled for a while and disappeared from the pavilion. Seeing this, Luo Ao nodded with satisfaction. His eyes fell on Xiao Yan, and a solemn expression appeared on his old face. He said in a deep voice, "Yes, I do have something to tell you. This matter is related to the Ginseng spiritual tribe." As soon as Luo Ao finished speaking, Xiao Yan could not help but be slightly surprised. He was secretly in awe. Wasn't the matter of the Ginseng spiritual tribe solved? Why did something happen again? With this thought in mind, Xiao Yan's expression gradually became serious. Xiao Yan had always had a good impression of the Ginseng spiritual tribe. Now that Xiao Yan heard that something had happened to the Ginseng spiritual tribe, he could not help but worry. On the other hand, Luo Jin, who heard that something had happened to the Ginseng spiritual tribe, could not help but widen his eyes at this moment. At this moment, he recalled the worried expression on Luo Ao's face when he left in the past 6 months. "Elder Luo, did something happen to the Ginseng spiritual tribe again?" Xiao Yan frowned and asked in a deep voice. His tone was full of worry. "Kid, do you still remember He Mu?" Hearing this, Xiao Yan's eyes suddenly focused. It was precisely because of that fellow that he had formed a subtle connection with Luo Ao and the Ginseng spirit race. Xiao Yan naturally wouldn't forget. Moreover, an extremely obscure dark glint instantly flashed deep within Xiao Yan's eyes when he thought of this. This short instant was something that even Luo Ao did not discover. "Last time, he died at your hands. This was the result that we all wanted to see. His death could be considered as eliminating a huge hidden danger for the Ginseng spirit race. At the same time, it also ended an old matter of the Ginseng spirit race." Luo Ao spoke unhurriedly. Xiao Yan and Luo Jin listened listlessly. But the sudden pause caused Xiao Yan and Luo Jin to instantly raise their eyes and look at Luo Ao. Only then did the latter open his mouth and say. Luo Ao then said, "Half a year ago, after Qing Mu entered the Ginseng spirit space, he accidentally discovered something astonishing." Next, Luo Ao told Xiao Yan about Qing Mu's discovery without missing a single word. Xiao Yan frowned as he listened. His face revealed a surprised expression. A long while later, Xiao Yan appeared to have completely digested this sudden information. Only then did he frown and nod. His gaze focused on Luo Ao as he spoke in a deep voice. He looked at Luo Ao and said in a deep voice, "That is to say, based on the weak aura in the Ginseng spirit root, He Mu hasn't completely died." Luo Ao nodded. This was what he wanted to express to Xiao Yan. As long as He Mu still had a trace of aura, no matter how weak it was, they couldn't let their guard down. But since the Ginseng spirit root is in Senior Qing Mu's hands, doesn't that mean that as long as we destroy the Ginseng spirit root, He Mu will be finished? Why has it dragged on until now? After thinking for a while, Xiao Yan couldn't help but ask again. The Ginseng spirit root was the lifeline of the spiritual Ginseng tribe. As long as the Ginseng spirit root was destroyed, it would be equivalent to taking He Mu's life. Why should they be afraid of He Mu stirring up trouble? Luo Ao understood this point much better than Xiao Yan. It was impossible that he didn't know this. However, when Luo Ao heard this, he helplessly shook his head and sighed. At first, Qing Mu also planned to do this, but later on he helplessly gave up. Xiao Yan frowned. Could there be another reason behind this? After Qing Mu and I investigated, that small piece of the Ginseng spirit root has already lost its use. Apart from being able to detect life and death like a soul jade tablet, He Mu's soul has already been separated from it. Even if we destroy the Ginseng spirit root, it will no longer cause any harm to He Mu. Xiao Yan immediately understood in his heart when he heard these words. In other words, it was likely that the current He Mu was merely relying on his remaining soul fragment to hide somewhere. He was still unwilling to give up on searching for a method to revive. When he thought of this, the corners of Xiao Yan's mouth could not help but curl up into a mocking sneer. This was really like the saying, the stronger one was, the more one would be afraid of death. Although it seemed that the brave were fearless and unrivaled, they were actually timid and unwilling to give up. However, when Xiaoyan returned to his senses, a strange expression involuntarily appeared on his face. He looked at Luo Ao and asked with a strange tone, Old Luo, you can't possibly be thinking that the remnant of that fellow's soul is in my body, right? Ha 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 ha. At first, this old man was indeed worried about this, so I went back and forth a few times in order to investigate whether the remnant of that fellow's soul was hidden in your body. Fortunately, this old man didn't discover anything. That fellow shouldn't be in your body, so this old man can be at ease. Hearing this, Luo Ao couldn't help but laugh out loud. Being exposed in a single sentence caused this cheerful old man to feel a little awkward. But, however, in the blink of an eye, old Luo once again raised his head and looked at Xiaoyan with a solemn expression. This caused Xiaoyan to involuntarily raise his eyebrows as he thought to himself, what is he playing at this time? Although this old man didn't discover any trace of He Mu's aura in your body, perhaps this isn't because he isn't in your body, but because of another reason. After the low shout, Xiaoyan's expression immediately turned sluggish. Beside him, Luo Jin also looked at the two people in front of him with a face full of doubt. His face was filled with helplessness. In the next moment, before Xiaoyan could speak, Luo Ao suddenly shouted in a serious tone, "Unless you are He Mu." Xiaoyan and Luo Jin were immediately stunned like wooden chickens when the cry sounded. Their hearts were so speechless that they were unable to speak. It was a long while later before Luo Ao laughed out loud, pulling the two of them back from their stagnant thoughts. Ha 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 ha, alright, I won't joke with you anymore. After this old man's investigation, it has already been proven that you aren't He Mu. So don't worry, this old man won't skin you and pull out your tendons. Ha 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 ha. Hearing this, Xiaoyan and Luo Jin looked at each other expressionlessly. Both of them curled their lips continuously in their hearts. This bastard actually really investigated Xiaoyan. Hee hee, alright. Don't worry about it. It was just a joke just now. Look at how nervous you are. Elder Luo chuckled. His smile revealed a hint of naughtiness. This was simply an old urchin. After hearing old Luo's words, Xiaoyan and Luo Jin glanced at the old man in front of them. Nervous? Where was there any nervousness? That was basically looking down on his words. Then, this old man has already said what should be said. This old man has also warned you about what should be warned. Remember, your life is the most important thing. Otherwise, any rare treasure will be empty. This junior understands. Xiaoyan nodded. He was naturally extremely clear about this. He had seen quite a number of people die because of greed. For his own sake, he would not make the same mistake again. Yes, since you understand, this old man will not say anything else. Finally, I will remind you that the western region cannot be compared to the southern region. The people here are truly like wolves and tigers. If you want to survive, you cannot just rely on Do techniques. Strength is the most important. Chapter 389. Senior Baihua, what's wrong? Did something happen? The Lu family's clan master, Lu Huabai, and the grand elder, Lu Xinqing, looked at each other in dismay. Both of them were confused. Baihua was the pill beast that Xiaoyan had left behind in the Lu family. Currently in the Lu family, she would usually take on a human form. Other than the clan master, Lu Huabai, and the grand elder, Lu Xinqing, she was the person with the highest status in the Lu family. Of course, that was only during normal times. If there was no one around, even the two of them would treat Baihua with respect. Someone's coming. Baihua's gaze was fixed on the distant horizon outside of the Azure Sun City. Her expression was extremely serious. She had already quietly raised the Do Qi in her body in preparation for all sorts of sudden changes. Hearing this, Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing, who was at the side, were first stunned. Then, they saw the deep and serious expression on Baihua's face and immediately became nervous. Lu Huabai hurriedly looked in the direction that Baihua was looking at and asked in a deep voice, "Could it be someone from the Azure Cloud Mansion again?" Ever since Xiaoyan had left the Lu family, the Azure Cloud Mansion had sent people to the Lu family a total of 5 times. Among them, the person who had come on the last trip was the strongest. The person leading the group was a one-star half-martial emperor. However, in the end he still returned helplessly. As for this time, Lu Huabai did not dare to imagine. If that was truly the case, then the person who had come would most likely not only be a one-star half-martial emperor. It's hard to say. There's only one person who has come. Furthermore, he seems to be investigating something. If he's someone from the Azure Cloud Mansion, he should have come directly to the Lu family instead of doing something so senseless. Bai Hua's brows were tightly knitted together as she slowly shook her head. However, her serious gaze did not leave the horizon in the slightest. If he's not someone from the Azure Cloud Mansion, why would he come here? There's nothing worthy of a half-martial emperor's attention in a small city like ours. The Grand Elder Lu Xinqing also frowned as he gently stroked his white beard and spoke in a deep voice. I still don't know. I only hope that he's only a passerby. Otherwise, I'm afraid that even I will not be able to stop him this time. Bai Hua said with a solemn expression. The two people from the Lu clan nodded when they heard this. They also had the same hope in their hearts. Unfortunately, the heavens were always unsatisfactory. Right after Bai Hua said those words, the four-star half-martial Emperor Qin Zhong, who was outside the Azure Sun City, took a step forward and soared into the sky. He was rapidly flying toward the Azure Sun City. He's here. In the Lu clan residence, Bai Hua spoke with a grave tone to Lu Huabai and Lu Yu. Then, she quickly flew into the sky with a grave heart, and stood in the sky above Qingyang City. Behind him, Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing also quickly followed. Right now, Bai Hua was representing the Lu family. They couldn't possibly let Bai Hua go out alone to face the enemy while they hid in their homes, and didn't dare to show their faces. At the same time that Bai Hua soared into the sky, a black dot was rapidly approaching from the distant horizon. The aura that was faintly emitted caused Bai Hua's heart to become incomparably solemn. When that figure entered the range of the Azure Sun City, Bai Hua involuntarily took a deep breath. She extended a pair of white palms from under her sleeves, and cupped her hands towards the figure in the distance. May I know who you are? What business do you have in my Azure Sun City? A clear voice resonated between heaven and earth like thunder. In the Azure Sun City below, everyone raised their eyes to the sky at this moment. In their line of sight, Bai Hua and the other two were shockingly above them. At the same time, in their line of sight, there was a blurry figure that was rapidly flying toward Bai Hua, and the other two at an extremely fast speed. Upon seeing this scene, the Azure Sun City below immediately became lively. After the previous few incidents that had happened to the Lu family, the people in the city could roughly guess that this person was most likely sent by the Azure Cloud Mansion again. However, compared to the previous time, the people in the Azure Sun City felt pity in their hearts. They still remembered the previous battle between Lu Huabai and the leader of the Azure Cloud Mansion. That battle was simply the most terrifying battle they had ever seen in their lives. Although Bai Hua lost in the end, it was fortunate that the Lu family was unscathed. However, this time around, they might not be so lucky. According to the guesses in the hearts of the people in the Azure Sun City, the Lu family might really be in big trouble this time around. Ha 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 ha. Are you Bai Hua? Before the person arrived, a loud laughter suddenly sounded like a thunderclap. Based on the voice, it seemed like the person who came did not have any ill intentions. In the sky, the expression on Bai Hua's face turned slightly solemn. Behind her, Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing could not help but reveal a strange expression on their faces. Why did this person seem to be coming for Bai Hua? After being stunned for a moment, Bai Hua quickly regained her senses. She cupped her hands together at the unfamiliar old man who had already arrived within 1,000 feet radius. I am indeed Bai Hua. May I know who you are? Upon hearing this, Qin Zhong laughed heartily. However, he did not answer Bai Hua's question first. Instead, his gaze landed on Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing, who were behind Bai Hua. In that case, these two must be the Lu family's clan leader, Lu Huabai, and the great elder Lu Xinqing. As soon as these words left his mouth, Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing's hearts immediately froze. They did not dare to be negligent as they hurriedly leaped forward and stood side by side with Bai Hua. At the same time, they cupped their hands together and greeted Qin Zhong respectfully. The two of us greet senior. In the face of a half-martial emperor, who even Bai Hua did not dare to be careless, The two of them were naturally extremely nervous. As they spoke, their bodies that were wrapped in brocade robes could not help but tremble slightly. Traces of cold sweat slowly trickled down from their temples. Haha, good. Since that's the case, that's right. Haha. Qin laughed loudly. He finally heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Although he had arrived half a year late, he was naturally relieved as long as he saw that the people from the Lu family were safe. However, although Qin had such thoughts in his heart, his words carried a different meaning when they were heard by Bai Hua and the other two. When Bai Hua and the other two heard this, their expressions turned grave immediately. Based on these words, it seemed like the other party was really from the Azure Cloud Mansion. Senior, what should we do now? Lu Huabai asked Bai Hua through voice transmission with a nervous expression on his face. Lu Huabai took a deep breath. After a long time, she said to Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing through voice transmission, "When I start fighting with him later, the two of you must quickly evacuate some of the people from the Lu family. I'll hold him back first. Remember, you must be quick. This guy's strength is at the level of a 4-star half-martial emperor. With my current strength, I won't be able to hold him back for long." Senior. Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing's expressions changed immediately when they heard this. They could not help but exclaim in shock. Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing looked at Bai Hua with a grave expression. From her words, the two of them were able to tell that she had made up her mind. Once they started fighting, Bai Hua would definitely use her last breath to evacuate the Lu family from the Azure Sun City. "Don't say any more, go." Bai Hua sternly cried out to Lu Huabai and Qin behind her. Immediately, she turned around and the dou qi in her body surged out. With a wave of her sleeve, a gentle force pushed Lu Huabai and Qin toward Qingyang City below. Bai Hua, on the other hand, moved her body and charged explosively toward Qin, who was looking at her with a stunned face. The Azure Cloud Mansion is really unwilling to give up. Since you have come to look for trouble, there's no need to say any more nonsense. Let's fight, Bai Hua shouted. She waved her hand and a sword landed in her hand. With a shake of the sword, dou qi overflowed. In the blink of an eye, Bai Hua had already arrived in front of Qin. She waved the sword in her hand and pierced it toward Qin's neck. Qin was suddenly shocked. He was even more confused in his heart. Why did this fellow want to fight him to the death when he had just arrived? They had never met before, and there was no need to mention any grievances between them. This caused him to feel somewhat sullen in his heart. However, before he could open his mouth to speak, Bai Hua's sword had already arrived in front of him, not allowing him to relax in the slightest. Due to the fact that Qin was a 4-star half-martial emperor, Bai Hua did not dare to show any mercy when she made her move. As a result, her attack was even more swift and fierce. In addition to Bai Hua's sudden attack, Qin was caught off guard. In an instant, Qin felt as though he was being attacked from both front and back. At the same time, he was unable to explain his real intention. In addition to that, Qin was afraid that he would hurt Bai Hua if he attacked. This made it even more difficult for him to explain himself. When Bai Hua saw that the 4-star half-martial emperor in front of her was actually unable to withstand her attacks, a trace of suspicion involuntarily rose in her heart. Under such an endless battle, Qin was finally unable to endure it any longer. He could not possibly continue fighting with Bai Hua here. He had to forcefully stop this misunderstanding. This fellow is just a 1-star half-martial emperor. Why is there no end to his attacks? There's no other way. In order to stop this misunderstanding, I can only wrong you a little. Qin sighed helplessly in his heart. He did not want Bai Hua to misunderstand him as someone from the Azure Cloud Mansion for no reason. With a loud cry, Qin's retreating figure suddenly stood in the air. His body shook violently, and an overbearing pressure that belonged to a 4-star half-martial emperor quickly spread out from his body. Qin clenched his fists tightly, and a thick yellow dou qi quickly condensed on his fists. His body moved and he once again began to fight with Bai Hua, who was charging toward him. Bang! 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 After dozens of exchanges, Qin finally shattered the long sword in Bai Hua's hand with a punch. At the same time, a huge force shook his hand and sent Bai Hua flying 1,000 feet away. This temporarily gave both of them a chance to catch their breaths. Bai Hua strenuously stopped her body. She did not dare to be the slightest bit careless in her heart. She was afraid that Qin Zhong would charge forward again. However, just as Bai Hua raised her head, Qin Zhong on the opposite side withdrew his dou qi. His face was helpless as he looked at Bai Hua. His mouth was similarly panting slightly. It was a long while later before he slowly opened his mouth and said in front of Bai Hua's stunned eyes, "It was Xiaoyan who asked me to come to the Lu clan of the Green Sun City. Book Friend Group. 476668761 begging for some monthly votes." Chapter 390. Senior Bai Hua, what's wrong? Did something happen? The Lu family's family head, Lu Huabai, and the grand elder, Lu Xinqing, looked at each other in dismay. Both of them had a puzzled expression on their faces. Bai Hua was the pill beast that Xiaoyan had left behind in the Lu family. Currently, in the Lu family, she would usually take on a human form. Other than the Lu family's family head, Lu Huabai, and the grand elder, Lu Xinqing, she was the person with the highest status in the Lu family. Of course, that was only during normal times. If there was no one around, even the two of them would treat Bai Hua with respect. Someone's coming. Bai Hua's gaze was fixed on the distant horizon outside of the Azure Sun City. Her expression was grave. She had already quietly raised the dou qi in her body in preparation for all sorts of sudden changes. Hearing this, Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing, who was at the side, were first stunned. Then, they saw the deep and serious expression on Bai Hua's face and immediately became nervous. Lu Huabai hurriedly looked in the direction that Bai Hua was looking at and asked in a deep voice, "Senior, could it be someone from the Azure Cloud Mansion again?" Ever since Xiaoyan had left the Lu family, the Azure Cloud Mansion had sent people to the Lu family a total of 5 times. Among them, the person who had come on the last trip was the strongest. The person leading the group was a 1-star half-martial emperor. However, in the end he still returned helplessly. As for this time, Lu Huabai did not dare to imagine. If that was truly the case, then the person who had come would most likely not only be a 1-star half-martial emperor. It's hard to say. There's only one person who came. Furthermore, he seemed to be investigating something. If he's someone from the Azure Cloud Mansion, he should have come directly to the Lu family instead of doing something so senseless. Bai Hua's brows were tightly knitted together as she slowly shook her head. However, her serious gaze did not leave the horizon in the slightest. If he's not someone from the Azure Cloud Mansion, why would he come here? In a small city like ours, there's nothing worthy of the attention of a half-martial emperor. The grand elder Lu Xinqing also frowned as he gently stroked his white beard and spoke in a deep voice. "I still don't know. I only hope that he's only passing by. Otherwise, I'm afraid that even I will not be able to stop him this time," Bai Hua said with a solemn expression. The two people from the Lu clan nodded when they heard this. They also had the same hope in their hearts. Unfortunately, the heavens were always unsatisfactory. Right after Bai Hua said those words, the 4-star half-martial emperor Qin Zhong, who was outside the Azure Sun City, took a step forward and soared into the sky. He was rapidly flying toward the Azure Sun City. "He's here." In the Lu clan residence, Bai Hua spoke with a grave tone to Lu Huabai and Lu Yu. Then she quickly flew into the sky with a grave heart, and stood in the sky above Qingyang City. Behind him, Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing also quickly followed. Right now, Bai Hua was representing the Lu family. They couldn't possibly let Bai Hua go out alone to face the enemy while they hid in their homes and didn't dare to show their faces. At the same time that Bai Hua soared into the sky, a black dot was rapidly approaching from the distant horizon. The aura that was faintly emitted caused Bai Hua's heart to become incomparably solemn. When that figure entered the range of the Azure Sun City, Bai Hua involuntarily took a deep breath. She extended a pair of white palms from under her sleeves, and cupped her hands towards the figure in the distance. "May I know who you are? What business do you have in my Azure Sun City?" A clear and bright voice resounded across the heavens and earth like clear thunder. Below, everyone in the Qingyang City raised their heads to look towards the sky. Within their line of sight, Bai Hua and the other two were impressively above them. At the same time, within their line of sight, there was a blurry figure that was rapidly flying towards Bai Hua, and the other two at an extremely fast speed. Upon seeing this scene, the Azure Sun City below immediately became lively. After the previous few incidents that had happened to the Lu family, the people in the city could roughly guess that this person was most likely sent by the Azure Cloud Mansion again. However, compared to the previous time, the people in the Azure Sun City felt pity in their hearts. They still remembered the previous battle between Lu Huabai and the leader of the Azure Cloud Mansion. That battle was simply the most terrifying battle they had ever seen in their lives. Although Bai Hua lost in the end, it was fortunate that the Lu family was unscathed. However, this time around they might not be so lucky. According to the guesses in the hearts of the people in the Azure Sun City, the Lu family might really be in big trouble this time around. Ha 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 ha, are you Bai Hua? Before the person arrived, a loud laughter suddenly sounded like a thunderclap. Based on the voice, it seemed like the person who had come did not have any ill intentions. In the sky, the expression on Bai Hua's face turned slightly solemn. Behind her, Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing could not help but reveal a strange expression on their faces. Why did this person seem to be here for Bai Hua? After being stunned for a moment, Bai Hua quickly regained her senses. She cupped her hands together at the unfamiliar old man who had already arrived within 1,000 feet radius and said, "I'm Bai Hua." "I am indeed Bai Hua. May I know who you are?" Upon hearing this, Qin Zhong laughed heartily. However, he did not answer Bai Hua's question first. Instead, his gaze landed on Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing who were behind Bai Hua before he opened his mouth again with a smile. In that case, these two must be the Lu family's clan leader, Lu Huabai, and the great elder Lu Xinqing. As soon as these words left his mouth, Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing's hearts instantly froze. They did not dare to be negligent as they hurriedly leaped forward and stood side by side with Bai Hua. At the same time, they cupped their hands together and greeted Qin Zhong respectfully. "The two of us greet Senior." In the face of a half-martial emperor, who even Bai Hua did not dare to be careless, the two of them were naturally extremely nervous. As they spoke, their bodies that were wrapped in embroidered robes could not help but tremble slightly. Traces of cold sweat slowly trickled down from their temples. "Haha, good. Since that's the case, then that's right. Ha." Qin Zhong laughed loudly. He finally heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Although he had arrived half a year late, he was naturally relieved as long as he saw that the people from the Lu family were safe. However, although Qin Zhong had such thoughts in his heart, his words had a different meaning in the ears of Bai Hua and the other two. When Bai Hua and the other two heard these words, their expressions turned grave immediately. Based on these words, it seemed like the other party was really from the Azure Cloud Mansion. "This, Senior, what should we do now?" Lu Huabai asked Bai Hua through voice transmission with a nervous expression on his face. Lu Huabai took a deep breath. After a long time, she said to Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing through voice transmission, "When I start fighting with him later, the two of you must quickly evacuate some of the people from the Lu family. I'll hold him back first. Remember, you must be quick. This guy's strength is at the level of a 4-star half-martial emperor. With my current strength, I won't be able to hold him back for long. Senior." Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing's expressions changed immediately when they heard this. They could not help but exclaim in shock. Lu Huabai and Lu Xinqing looked at Bai Hua with a grave expression. From her words, the two of them were able to tell that she had made up her mind. Once they started fighting, Bai Hua would definitely use her last breath to evacuate the Lu family from the Azure Sun City. "Don't say any more, go." Bai Hua sternly cried out to Lu Huabai and Qin Zhong behind her. Immediately, she turned around and the Douqi in her body surged out. She waved her sleeves and a gentle force pushed Lu Huabai and Qin Zhong toward Qingyang City below. She, on the other hand, moved her body and charged explosively toward Qin Zhong, who was looking at her with a stunned face. "The Azure Cloud Mansion is really unwilling to give up. Since you have come to look for trouble, there's no need to say any more nonsense. Let's fight," Bai Hua shouted. She waved her hand and a sword landed in her hand. With a shake of the sword, Douqi overflowed. In the blink of an eye, Bai Hua had already arrived in front of Qin Zhong. She waved the sword in her hand and pierced it toward Qin Zhong's neck. "You?" Qin Zhong was suddenly shocked. He was even more confused in his heart. Why did this fellow want to fight him to the death when he had just arrived? They had never met before, and there was no need to mention any grievances between them. This caused him to feel somewhat sullen in his heart. However, before he could open his mouth to speak, Bai Hua's sword had already arrived in front of him, not allowing him to relax in the slightest. Due to the fact that Qin Zhong was a 4-star half-martial emperor, Bai Hua did not dare to hold back in the slightest when she attacked him. As a result, her attacks were even more ferocious and swift. Adding on the fact that Bai Hua had suddenly attacked him, Qin Zhong was caught off guard. In an instant, Qin Zhong felt as if he was being attacked from both sides. At the same time, it also caused him to be unable to explain his true intention. In addition to that, Qin Zhong was afraid that he would hurt Bai Hua if he attacked. This made it even more difficult for him to explain. When Bai Hua saw that the 4-star half-martial emperor in front of her was actually unable to withstand her attacks, a trace of suspicion involuntarily rose in her heart. Under such an endless battle, Qin Zhong was finally unable to endure it any longer. He could not possibly continue fighting with Bai Hua here. He had to forcefully stop this misunderstanding. This fellow is just a 1-star half-martial emperor. Why is there no end to his attacks? There's no other way. In order to stop this misunderstanding, I can only wrong you a little. Qin Zhong sighed helplessly in his heart. He did not want Bai Hua to misunderstand him as someone from the Azure Cloud Mansion for no reason. Ha! With a loud cry, Qin Zhong's retreating figure suddenly stood in the air. His body shook violently, and an overbearing pressure that belonged to a 4-star half-martial emperor quickly spread out from his body. Qin Zhong clenched both his fists tightly, and a thick yellow doqi quickly condensed on his fists. His body moved and he once again began to fight with Bai Hua, who was charging toward him. Bang! 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 After dozens of exchanges, Qin Zhong finally shattered the longsword in Bai Hua's hand with a punch. At the same time, the huge force in his hand shook and sent Bai Hua flying 1,000 feet away. This temporarily gave both of them a chance to catch their breaths. Bai Hua strenuously stopped her body. She did not dare to be the slightest bit careless in her heart. She was afraid that Qin Zhong would attack again. However, when Bai Hua raised her head, Qin Zhong on the opposite side withdrew his doqi. His face was helpless as he looked at Bai Hua. His mouth was similarly panting softly. It was a long while later before he slowly opened his mouth to speak in front of Bai Hua's stunned eyes. It was Xiaoyan who asked me to come to the Lu clan of the Green Sun City. Book Friends Group 47666871 begging for some monthly votes. Chapter 391. The bustling streets were filled with all kinds of people. The continuous flow of people into Emerald City made the city even livelier as it was nearing noon. After Xiaoyan left the Yunin Pavilion, he headed towards the west of the city. The west was the direction of the Western Wasteland region. Before leaving the Yunin Pavilion, Luojin had given Xiaoyan a map of the Shilin region. On the map, there were detailed markings of the major cities and mountain ranges in the Shilin region, especially the locations of the 4 major sects. The map also clearly marked out their areas of influence. Thinking about it, Luojin had purposely done this in hopes that Xiaoyan would not fall into the trap set by the 4 major sects. It could also be considered as a precaution for Xiaoyan. In addition, Xiaoyan also found out from the map that if he wanted to go to the Western Wasteland region, there were only 2 paths he could choose from. From the map, he knew that the only way to the Western Wasteland region from the outskirts of the Shilin region was through a human city and a mountain range inhabited by magic beasts. This was also the difference between the main forces in the Shilin region. Xiaoyan naturally did not dare to casually touch those human cities. Once he appeared in public, the 4 major sects would probably spare no effort to hunt him down. Even if it was not for the sky extinction steps, they would definitely not let Xiaoyan off so easily. In addition, most of the human cities were also marked with the 4 major sects. Among them, there were even a few that were close to where magic beasts lived. If one wanted to pass through these 2 places, it would be impossible. Through Luojin, Xiaoyan also found out that the mountain range where the magic beasts lived was called the Shilin Mountain Range. Although there were no people from the 4 major sects there, the danger in the Shilin Mountain Range was not any lower than the outside world. According to Luojin, there was no lack of Do-D-level magic beasts in the Shilin Mountain Range. Those magic beasts had already transformed into human forms. Although they did not like to kill normally, Once one trespassed into their territory, they would not be merciful. The current Xiao Yan was no longer concerned about a Band D-class magical beast. Xiao Yan was confident that with the strength that he currently possessed, he would not need to fear anyone below the Do D class. Therefore, Xiao Yan was rather decisive in this decision, and directly chose to head towards the Shilin mountain range. As far as Xiao Yan was concerned, compared to the four great sects, he would be like a fish in water in the Shilin mountain range. After choosing his target, Xiao Yan did not delay any longer. With a move of his body, he quickly passed through the crowd and flew towards the west of Emerald City. However, just as he was flying, Xiao Yan could not help but frown slightly. Just a moment ago, he felt a few obscure auras sweep past his body. Although those auras were extremely faint, with the frightening spiritual strength of a rank 2 alchemist, Xiao Yan was still able to sense the traces of cold intent within. Oh, we are still in Emerald City, yet there are already people who are a little restless. Sensing this, the corner of Xiao Yan's mouth lifted into a cold smile. He quickly glanced behind him from the corner of his eyes. Indeed, at the edge of Xiao Yan's line of sight, there were a few blurry small black dots. Those few black dots were the few people who had just probed Xiao Yan's aura. A few days ago, when Xiao Yan had just woken up, Luo Jin had already told him about how the four great sects were hunting him down in all directions. Moreover, he had also told Xiao Yan about the bounty and wanted portraits that the four great sects had placed on him. When he first heard this news, Xiao Yan could not help but be stunned for a moment. However, after that, the expression on his face swiftly turned gloomy. Since the four great sects wanted to kill him so badly, Xiao Yan naturally could not sit still and wait for his death. Furthermore, the four great sects had already put out a bounty on Xiao Yan in the entire western region. Obviously, they wanted to force Xiao Yan to show himself. If Xiao Yan did not show himself, others would think that he was a coward. However, with Xiao Yan's character, how could he allow others to label him with such a label? Haha, what a great four great sections. This move of yours is really sinister. However, if you want to catch me, you will have to see how strong you are first. Xiao Yan let out a cold laugh. The speed at which he flew forward suddenly increased. A couple of human figures behind him involuntarily frowned slightly. They exchanged glances with one another before clenching their teeth and swiftly giving chase. In a short period of time, Xiao Yan had already gradually distanced himself from Emerald Green City. As for those figures, they were still in hot pursuit. However, when they arrived in the sky above an uninhabited mountain range, they could not help but frown slightly. The reason for that was because Xiao Yan, who had been rapidly flying in front of them a moment ago, had disappeared into thin air with a puff, like a clump of dense fog. The few people in the sky frowned. They could not understand just what had happened. How was it possible for Xiao Yan to disappear in such a strange manner? What shocked them the most was that as Xiao Yan turned into a clump of dense fog and disappeared, even his aura had disappeared without a trace. Damn it, where exactly did that brat run off to? Could it be that he discovered us and used the speed of the sky extinction steps to escape from this place? That's not impossible. Although his strength is not weak, there are after all 6 of us. 6 8-star half-martial emperors. Even if he has the assistance of the puppet and that lightning dragon, he is still no match for us. Among the 6 people, an old man wearing a black gown had his hands behind his back. As he listened to the words of the other old men beside him, he nodded slightly and began to carefully analyze Xiao Yan's thoughts. However, just as this old man's words were spat out, a calm and cold laughter suddenly sounded from an unknown location. Oh, is that so? I am truly curious to see exactly how many rounds you can last against the combined strength of 6 8-star half-martial emperors. Right after those words left his mouth, before the expressions of the 6 old men in the sky changed greatly, Xiao Yan's figure slowly appeared in the sky 100 feet behind them. In the next instant, when the 6 8-star half-martial emperors turned around, they clearly saw Xiao Yan. At the same time, the expressions on their faces changed once again. Unable to contain themselves, they all cried out in alarm. Xiao Yan. That's me. The corners of Xiao Yan's mouth lifted into a faint smile as he replied with a light smile. Humph. Xiao Yan, aren't you being too arrogant and conceited? Although you managed to block the attack of a Do-D half a year ago, that was only when they held back. However, it is different now. The 6 of us are all 8-star half-martial emperors. Even if you have the protection of your puppet and pet, we will still not be able to protect you. Seeing Xiao Yan, the black-gowned old man who spoke earlier was also slightly startled in his heart. As his throat rolled, his face once again changed into a ruthless expression as he spoke to Xiao Yan in a deep voice. Haha, whether or not I am being arrogant and conceited, it is better to test me first before commenting. Oh, 6 people, including you all, the number of 8-star half-martial emperors who have died by my hands should be around 10. Hearing this, Xiao Yan merely smiled faintly. In the next instant, his white hand suddenly waved through the air. Doqi wildly surged. Following Xiao Yan's thought, the dark black heavy Xian ruler appeared inch by inch in Xiao Yan's hand. With the addition of the heavenly flame, it caused the heavy Xian ruler to appear quite imposing. Chapter 392. As Xiao Yan's giant ruler landed heavily on the ground, a surge of surging aura brought forth a chilling wind pressure. It was like the low roar of a demonic beast as it whistled through the sky. Following the appearance of the dark heavy ruler, gorgeous heavenly flames suddenly rose from beneath Xiao Yan's feet. In the next instant, they turned into a ring of fire that rapidly spread in all directions. Flame Domain. After the Flame Domain was opened, the aura on Xiao Yan's body surged even more violently. Heavenly flames filled his eyes and an overflowing soaring battle intent erupted from Xiao Yan's body. Ha 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 ha, come. Let me see exactly how powerful 6 8-star half-martial emperors are. A bold and unrestrained laugh sounded. Xiao Yan held the heavy ruler in his hand. His body moved and he took the lead to charge towards the 6 8-star half-martial emperors. Humph. You're courting death. You actually dare to face us 6 8-star half-martial emperors by yourself. You're truly reckless. Seeing that Xiao Yan did not even summon the Northern King, Xiao Jin, the leading black-robed old man immediately let out a furious snort. Xiao Yan's arrogant actions had truly caused them to be incomparably furious. Since he's courting death, why don't we capture him in one go and deliver him to the 4 great sects? Hee hee, the bounty will all belong to us. A dark-skinned old man among the 6 of them looked at Xiao Yan who was shooting toward them. His mouth emitted a disdainful ridicule as he spoke. Hearing that, the others also revealed greedy gazes as they nodded their heads. Regardless of how many people Xiao Yan was, as long as they could capture him, the bounty of the 4 great sects would all belong to them. Thus, the 4 8-star half-martial emperors would naturally not be courteous. Go. Following the thunder-like cry that was emitted from the old man's mouth, the few people beside him immediately nodded in unison. Immediately, the Do-Chi within their bodies suddenly surged out at this moment, transforming into numerous Do-Chi light pillars of different colors that shot to the sky. Soon after, the figures of several people suddenly moved, each of their hands revealing their weapons, and charged toward Xiao Yan who was coming towards them. In the end, only the black-robed old man hesitated for a moment before following closely behind. Although he was not afraid of Xiao Yan, he continued to faintly sense a sense of danger. This kind of faint feeling of danger might not cause him to feel afraid, but it still caused his heart to feel a little uneasy. However, when his gaze landed on Xiao Yan, that uneasy feeling subconsciously disappeared. It was as if that dangerous aura did not come from Xiao Yan. Boom. The large ruler violently collided with the 6 people who had rushed forward. Following the sound of metal striking metal, the Do-Chi that was attached to the weapons of both parties suddenly erupted at this moment. Ferocious Do-Chi waves suddenly swept out from the point of collision between the large ruler and the 6 weapons. At this moment, Xiao Yan and the 6 8-star half-martial emperors' bodies all shook, and they rapidly retreated backwards. The 6 8-star half-martial emperors were still fine. They merely shook their bodies, and were stopped 100 feet away. As for Xiao Yan, under the joint attack of the 6 8-star half-martial emperors, his body was miserably sent flying for a distance of nearly 100 feet. Only then did he manage to stabilize his body. To the current Xiao Yan, facing 6 8-star half-martial emperors by himself was still too strenuous. Humph humph, Xiao Yan. It seems that you can only rely on your sharp tongue. Today you are destined to be taken away by us. That dark-skinned old man took a step forward. A tyrannical aura that belonged to an 8-star half-martial emperor condensed in front of him and swept toward Xiaoyan. Hearing this, Xiaoyan's indifferent expression did not change much. What the other party said was correct. 6 8-star half-martial emperors were indeed making things difficult for him. However, Xiaoyan was not a person who could be treated with common sense. If anyone dared to underestimate Xiaoyan, the price they would have to pay would be the pain of their entire life. It seems that I can only take care of them one by one. Very well, let me see exactly where the limit of my current strength lies. As this thought flashed through his mind, Xiaoyan immediately laughed out loud. He tightly gripped the heavy Xian ruler, and the dou qi within his body frantically poured out, filling the interior of the heavy Xian ruler. The mysterious patterns on the surface of the pitch-black ruler were also gradually filled by the heavenly flame. 7-layered heaven-breaking ruler. The instant the thunderous shout sounded from his mouth, Xiaoyan's body suddenly rushed forward and charged explosively toward the 6 8-star half-martial emperors opposite him. Humph! Overestimating your capabilities. Attack together. As long as we take care of this brat, we can choose any emperor core martial technique we want. In the future, this western region will definitely be ours. Attack. That dark-skinned old man fiercely waved his palm forward and shouted once again. When his voice sounded, the eyes of the people beside him involuntarily surged with greed once again. They glanced at each other and then fiercely nodded. As the dou qi within their bodies rose, they once again charged explosively toward the incoming Xiaoyan. In an instant, the distance of 100 feet between the two sides had been reduced by more than half. The distance between Xiaoyan and the 6 8-star half-martial emperors was now less than 10 feet. At such a close distance, in addition to the fact that both sides were half-martial emperors, the invisible pressure from their auras had already collided with each other. As Xiaoyan was fighting against 6 people by himself, he naturally fell into a disadvantageous position. Haha, arrogant brat, you are destined to pay the price for your current actions. Die. Seeing that Xiaoyan had already revealed a disadvantageous position, the 8-star half-martial emperor who spoke earlier once again ridiculed. His words were filled with disdain towards Xiaoyan. Humph, gratuitous arrogance, you will have to pay the price. Spatial tent, rise. With a low shout, Xiaoyan's body that was explosively charging forward suddenly disappeared into the horizon before the disbelieving gazes of the 6 8-star half-martial emperors. 6 Paths Tent. This was a move that Xiaoyan had only used once half a year ago. Thus, very few people knew about it. Unfortunately, the 6 8-star half-martial emperors before Xiaoyan knew nothing about it. In the next instant, at the instant when the 6 8-star half-martial emperors reacted, Xiaoyan's figure suddenly appeared before the dark-skinned old man among the 6 of them. Through the probing of Xiaoyan's soul power, this old man was the weakest among the 6. He had only just broken through to the 8-star half-martial emperor realm. Thus, every time he attacked he would hesitate, and first instigate the others beside him to attack. Only then would he act like a dog that relied on its master's power to attack. Thus in Xiaoyan's eyes, this old man was an out-and-out despicable person. Although Xiaoyan's cultivation was inferior to the old man's, in terms of mentality, compared to him, Xiaoyan was an out-and-out expert. In this sort of situation, when the strong faced the weak, there was naturally no need for pity. Thus, in the instant that dark-skinned old man reacted, Xiaoyan's enormous ruler ruthlessly smashed onto his chest. 7-layered heaven-breaking ruler, 1 ruler. When the ruler descended, a person died. Chapter 393. In the sky, Xiaoyan slowly withdrew the dark heavy buster sword in his hand. When he looked at the dark-skinned 8-star half-martial emperor again, he simply did not have the strength to resist the sudden strike of the buster sword. The instant the dark heavy buster sword smashed into his chest, the frighteningly enormous power directly caused his entire chest to cave in. Following the unceasing ka-ka sounds of bones breaking, the frightening dou qi contained within the dark heavy buster sword rapidly poured into the old man's body. Like wild horses that had escaped their reins, the dou qi frantically wreaked havoc within the old man's body. Bang! In the sky, following the muffled sound of a balloon exploding, the body of the 8-star half-martial emperor directly and uncontrollably smashed into the mountain range below. Immediately after, Another rumbling sound was heard. The old man's body was deeply buried in the mountain range below, and his figure could no longer be seen. Through Xiao Yan's soul detection, the old man had already fallen into a seriously injured state. At this moment, even moving a finger would be extremely strenuous for him. It was also at this moment that the remaining 5 8-star half-martial emperors finally recovered from their shock. When they forcibly stopped their bodies and turned their heads to look at Xiao Yan, the expressions on their faces instantly changed greatly. It was hard to imagine that in this short instant, Xiao Yan had actually arrived among the 6 of them. With such frightening speed, it was likely that even 9-star half-martial emperors would not be able to compare to him. This Zhao Hui. He actually seriously injured Zhao Hui. However, when one of the remaining 5 noticed the dark-skinned old man buried deep in the mountain range below, the expression on their faces instantly became one of shock. Seriously injuring an 8-star half-martial emperor with a single strike. Was this sort of power truly something that a mere 5-star half-martial emperor could accomplish? Although they felt disbelief in their hearts, at this moment, the truth was right before their eyes. They had no choice but to believe it. Seeing the shocked expressions on the faces of the 5 8-star half-martial emperors, the corners of Xiao Yan's mouth curled into a sneer once again. He forcefully swung the Buster sword in his hand, and it stood diagonally to the right of Xiao Yan. As the dou qi within his body surged violently, the light on the Buster sword grew even brighter. Hee, how about it? Do the 5 of you want to have a taste as well? If you want to give it a try, I don't mind spending a little more effort. It had to be said that Xiao Yan's move of killing the chicken to warn the monkey had indeed caused the 5 of them to be extremely terrified. Thinking about Zhao Hui's tragic case, the 5 of them could not help but feel a deep chill in their hearts. They really did not want to follow in Zhao Hui's footsteps. Although the 5 of them were extremely terrified in their hearts. Although the method of killing the chicken to warn the monkey was not bad, but as the saying goes, when there is a great reward, there will be brave men. Seeing the benefits in front of them, but remaining indifferent. Wasn't this something that only a fool would do? Furthermore, even though they were missing a person, there were still 5 of them left. 5 8-star half-martial emperors against a single 5-star half-martial emperor. Thus, how could they possibly be afraid? Humph. Xiao Yan, stop trying to intimidate us here. Even though you've seriously injured Zhao Hui, he is merely the weakest among the 6 of us. This old man knows that you're an alchemist. It is precisely because of this that you decided to attack him, and not one of the 5 of us, right? This time around, the person who spoke was another old man wearing an embroidered gown. Other than the black-gowned old man, he was the second person present with the strength of a late-stage 8-star half-martial emperor. He could also be said to be the strongest person present. Thus, his words carried quite a bit of weight. Hearing those words, Xiao Yan lightly smiled. Regardless of what the reason might be, at the very least, that 8-star half-martial emperor had been seriously injured by him. Seriously injuring an 8-star half-martial emperor with the strength of a 5-star half-martial emperor was a heaven-defying achievement. Even in the entire continent, how many people could accomplish such a feat? However, in the next instant, the words that were emitted from that old man's mouth caused Xiao Yan's expression to involuntarily change slightly upon hearing them. Moreover, that secret technique of yours that allows you to travel through space and the human class dou skill. If you were to use both of them at the same time, the consumption of dou qi would likely not be a simple amount. Based on this old man's guess, how many times can you use such an attack? The old man asked in a stern voice. After seeing the change in expression on Xiao Yan's face, his face involuntarily revealed a pleased cold smile. A human class dou skill was not something that only Xiao Yan possessed. Naturally, they did not need to worry about this. However, the only thing that caused them to be afraid of was Xiao Yan's strange agility. It was actually able to travel through space and instantly arrive before them. If they were to be caught off guard every single time, how could they possibly continue fighting? Fortunately, the change in expression on Xiao Yan's face caused these few 8-star half-emperors to gain some confidence in their hearts. As long as Xiao Yan had a weakness, it would become their advantage. They would similarly be able to rely on this to take down Xiao Yan. However, while they were considering this, they had overlooked the most important point. Even if the Do Qi within Xiao Yan's body was exhausted, one should not forget that there was still the Northern King and Xiao Jin, whose strength was comparable to a 9-star half-emperor, in his storage ring and his body. At that time, they would also be unable to do anything to Xiao Yan. Everyone attack together and form an encirclement to trap him within. At that time, regardless of how fast his speed is, as long as the people on the other side are able to react in time, they will also be able to resolve Xiao Yan's attack. The embroidered robed man waved his hand with great force as Do Qi spluttered out from his body. His body moved, and he was the first to charge towards Xiao Yan. When the others heard this, they immediately nodded violently. Their bodies shook as Do Qi wildly surged within their bodies. One by one, they also charged towards Xiao Yan. Although this method could not be considered excellent, it was the most practical method at the moment. At the very least, it would cause Xiao Yan's speed to lose its effect in front of them. Xiao Yan narrowed his eyes. His gaze slowly swept across the 5 people surrounding him. A piercingly cold glint flashed deep within his eyes. The hand that was holding the heavy Xian ruler exerted a little force, and the wide, huge ruler was cleverly placed at a strange angle. What Xiao Yan did not expect was that the few people in front of him were even more greedy and crazy than he had imagined. Even at this moment, they were actually still planning to take advantage of him. However, despite this, Xiao Yan was not afraid of them. He was confident that with the strength that he currently possessed, there was no one below the Do D class who could pose any threat to him. The people in front of him were no exception. Since all of you are unwilling to give up, we can only use the method of fighting to resolve the conflict between us. Xiao Yan's gaze focused on the embroidered robed old man who had spoken earlier as he spoke in an indifferent tone. We will not suffer the loss we suffered just now a second time. Therefore, this time around you should just obediently accept your death. The embroidered robed old man coldly laughed as he met Xiao Yan's gaze. Immediately, he waved his hand abruptly and cried out sternly, "Attack together and take down Xiao Yan." Chapter 394. In the sky, the 5 8-star half-martial emperors shouted in unison. As the Do Qi within their bodies surged, pillars of Do Qi soared into the sky and into the 9 heavens. The frightening oppressive might faintly condensed into 5 figures that heavily pressed down on Xiao Yan's body, causing his body that was floating in the sky to involuntarily sink down slightly. Although the combined oppressive might of the 5 8-star half-martial emperors was incomparably frightening, Xiao Yan's face still appeared extremely calm. If they wanted to suppress him with merely this, then they were truly underestimating Xiao Yan too much. Humph! Following a cold snort, the purple gold dragon phoenix bloodline within Xiao Yan's body was instantly activated. An even more overbearing aura was emitted from Xiao Yan's body. As the enormous ruler in Xiao Yan's hand was waved horizontally, the oppressive might pressing down on him was immediately broken apart by the ruler. After the oppressive might was broken apart, an invisible air wave swept forth from Xiao Yan's body. The bodies of the 5 figures involuntarily trembled, and they involuntarily took half a step back. The gazes with which they raised their heads to look at Xiao Yan with changed abruptly. The oppressive might of 5 8-star half-martial emperors was actually broken apart by Xiao Yan alone. This was simply unimaginable. This brat is strange. We absolutely cannot lower our guard. All of you stop holding back. If you truly wish to obtain those medicinal pellets and martial techniques, then go all out. Otherwise, if we fail miserably, none of us will be able to obtain any benefits. At this moment, that black-robed old man no longer had the heart to care about the indescribable chilliness in his heart. With a stern shout, he warned the other 4. Hearing that, the other 4 immediately looked to each other in dismay. After glancing at each other, they fiercely nodded. Each of them emitted a frightening shout from their mouths. With a movement of their bodies, they charged explosively toward Xiao Yan with ferocious Do Qi waves. Faced with attacks coming from 5 different directions, Xiao Yan did not dare to be careless. Although he was not afraid of these 5 people, they were, after all, 8-star half-martial emperors. If their attacks were to land on him, the consequences would not be a joke. In the next instant, the 5 figures arrived around Xiao Yan. Surging Do Qi unceasingly surged out. Under the control of the 5 people, They condensed into various Do skills that ruthlessly smashed toward Xiao Yan. Faced with the ferocious attacks of the 5 people, Xiao Yan naturally did not dare to underestimate them. With a thought, his soul power between his brows surged forth. His soul power was like a boundless sea water that enveloped the entire region. Under the probing of Xiao Yan's powerful soul power, the attacks of the 5 people immediately slowed down in Xiao Yan's mind. As for Xiao Yan, he was able to catch his breath under this ferocious attack. In an instant, Xiao Yan gradually became more and more at ease under the joint attacks of the 5 8-star half-martial emperors. Although the attacks of the 5 8-star half-martial emperors were not weak, Xiao Yan was able to rely on his tyrannical strength and his frightening agility Do skill to temporarily remain undefeated. Although he was aware that this kind of condition could not be maintained for long, it still caused the 5 bandits to feel even more anxious and impatient in their hearts. Most of the time, they were shocked by Xiao Yan's strength, which far exceeded their own cultivation. Which 5-star half-martial emperor could be like him, who could not reveal any flaws under the attacks of 8-star half-martial emperors? Who could possibly face 5 8-star half-martial emperors with the strength of a 5-star half-martial emperor? Needless to say, it was likely that such a person did not exist in the entire continent. Fists and palms collided. Every time Xiao Yan and the 5 8-star half-martial emperors collided, it would cause the heaven and earth to tremble and space to shatter. The great battle on the battlefield also became more and more intense. After a short period of equilibrium, Xiao Yan unavoidably ended up at a disadvantage in the face of the powerful combined attacks of the 5 8-star half-martial emperors and their frightening attacks. The attacks of the 5 people were swift and fierce. Their attacks were as fast as lightning and ferocious. If it wasn't for Xiao Yan's powerful soul power, he would likely have been defeated long ago. However, even in such an intense battle, Xiao Yan's expression remained calm. His pair of pitch-black eyes appeared to be as calm as an ancient well. Although the attacks of the 5 people were powerful and their auras were frightening, Xiao Yan was able to see through all of their methods. Faced with the attacks of the 5 people, if it were any other ordinary half-martial emperor, they would likely have been seriously injured long ago. However, Xiao Yan was no ordinary person. In such an intense melee battle, every part of Xiao Yan's body had become his weapon. His fists, elbows, shoulders, knees, waist and even his head had become Xiao Yan's greatest weapons in battle. As for the wide and enormous ruler in his hand, it was as if it was a part of his body. Even though it was clearly such a heavy and enormous ruler, in Xiao Yan's hand, it was as light as a leaf. Its nimbleness was not the slightest bit inferior to the joints of his arms. Of course it was, after all, 5 8-star half-martial emperors before him. Even Xiao Yan was unable to completely ignore the power of experts of that level. Thus, in the countless intense collisions, Xiao Yan had suffered quite a bit of injuries. Of course, compared to the attacks of the 5 people, the injuries that Xiao Yan had suffered could not be considered much. Bang! After another intense collision, Xiao Yan and the embroidered-robed old man both took 100 steps back. Xiao Yan's complexion was slightly pale, and a dazzling dark red trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. As for the embroidered-robed old man, although his aura was still deep and vigorous, under his serious expression, the blood within his body was also surging. The gaze with which he looked at Xiao Yan was also filled with astonishment. It was hard to imagine that not only did Xiao Yan's strength far surpass his cultivation, even his seemingly frail body was far from what he had imagined. Ha! Xiao Yan, prepare to die. However, just as Xiao Yan's figure stopped moving, in the next instant, a figure brandished a large blade in his hand and rapidly shot over from behind him. The distance between him and Xiao Yan was only a short distance of several tens of feet. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yan's heart immediately tightened. At the instant he turned around, the enormous ruler in his hand was placed horizontally before his chest in an attempt to block this sudden attack. Clang! An ear-splitting collision sound rang out, and Xiao Yan's body flew back uncontrollably. His feet fiercely stomped on the air, and with every step he took, the space would collapse. It was not hard to imagine exactly how frightening the might of the blade strike that Xiao Yan had just received was. When Xiao Yan once again forcibly stopped himself in the air with great difficulty, he finally could not help but spit out a large mouthful of blood. His pale complexion showed that he had spent a lot of effort. Facing the continuous bombardment of an 8-star half-martial emperor, even if he possessed a supreme skill, it was still difficult for him to withstand it. However, just as Xiaoyan came back to his senses, another person rushed forward from behind him, intending to give Xiaoyan the final blow. This time, Xiaoyan did not turn around to block. Instead, he flipped his hand and stored the heavy Xian ruler into his storage ring. With a thought, surging soul power frantically surged out. Between the heavens and the earth, strands of tiny pitch-black great Dao energy rapidly condensed in the space before Xiaoyan. 6 Dao tense condense. Xiaoyan let out a soft cry in a low and deep voice. A ruthless expression suddenly surged into his eyes. This group of people in front of him had truly stirred up the fury in his heart. What awaited them next was a wild storm of attacks. He would also be filled with despair. In the next instant, when that figure passed through the afterimage left behind by Xiaoyan, the latter had already appeared at a higher altitude in the sky. Holding the enormous ruler in his hand and looking down, the Dou Qi within his body frantically poured into the heavy Xian ruler in his hand. A vast and mighty aura slowly spread from it. Chapter 395. High up in the sky, Xiaoyan's eyes contained a ruthless expression. His cold gaze quickly locked onto a person. Xiaoyan's gaze rapidly swept around, and immediately locked onto a short and fat old man among the 5. The latter's strength was currently the weakest among the 5. At the same time, he was also the one that Xiaoyan could guarantee he would defeat the fastest. After locking onto his target, Xiaoyan immediately used the sky extinction steps. In an instant, he had already arrived in front of the short and fat old man. Yellow spring palm. Xiaoyan's right hand held the giant ruler in a reverse grip. His left arm was bent and raised behind his ear. Surging Dou Qi violently surged out from his palm and rapidly agglomerated into a crystal-like palm above Xiaoyan's palm. The instant the crystal-like palm was completely formed, Xiaoyan's left palm ruthlessly smashed toward the incoming old man. Faced with Xiaoyan who had launched the first attack, the old man naturally understood the reason behind this. However, he was after all an 8-star half-martial emperor. He was also quite confident in his own strength. At the moment when Xiaoyan's palm arrived, the old man finally made his move. The old man's body that was charging forward suddenly paused in the air. His hand suddenly clenched in the air. Dou Qi gushed out from his palm and rapidly agglomerated into an axe and hammer in the old man's hand. Holding the axe and hammer in his hand, the old man exerted strength in his arm. His firm muscles immediately bulged and tore apart his sleeves. His thick and solid arm was immediately exposed to the air. Seeing this scene, Xiaoyan's eyes involuntarily hardened slightly. Unexpectedly, this short and fat old man before him was actually a fellow with quite a strong physical body. Unfortunately, regardless of how strong his physical body was, it would be difficult for him to escape death today. Brat, prepare to die. Mortal class Dou skill, final blow. After the shout sounded, the axe and hammer in the old man's hand was immediately swung upward. The square and thick surface of the hammer directly faced Xiaoyan's palm. Sharp wind unceasingly compressed the air and ear-piercing sonic booms were also unceasingly emitted. Clang! In the next moment, as the sound of metal colliding rang out, the invisible space immediately stirred up layers of wave-like spatial waves. With Xiaoyan and the old man as the center, it rapidly swept out in all directions. This loud sound was just like a bolt from the blue. Not long after the spatial wave swept over, an even more frightening Dou Qi wave swept in all directions. This time around, even the endless mountain range below was unavoidably caught in the crossfire. Just a single attack had caused an enormous deep pit to appear in the mountain range. At the same time, when the energy storm swept out, the expressions of the other 4 people in the surroundings changed. With a move of their bodies, they retreated backwards. Solemnly, they stared at the center that was blocked by the energy storm. At that spot, there were still 2 extremely strong auras violently clashing. Crack! Unfortunately, even though Xiaoyan's strength was not weak, that short and fat old man was after all an 8-star half-martial emperor. Moreover, the Dou skill that he was currently using was even stronger than Xiaoyan's yellow spring palm. Hence, in this collision, Xiaoyan was temporarily defeated. Following a clear cracking sound, A tiny crack line appeared on Xiao Yan's yellow spring palm. Bang! When the energy storm scattered, the two human figures in the sky withdrew explosively. Xiao Yan's body withdrew by 10,000 feet in a somewhat miserable manner. His feet stomped violently on the empty air. Each time his foot landed, it would cause the mountain range below to collapse. From this, one could imagine just what kind of frightening strength Xiao Yan was enduring. After Xiao Yan strenuously stopped his body, he involuntarily vomited a mouthful of dark red blood. At this moment, his already pale complexion instantly became deathly pale. It must be said that an 8-star half-martial emperor was an 8-star half-martial emperor. Even though Xiao Yan was not weak, the difference in their cultivations had still allowed the latter to gain quite a bit of an advantage. However, to Xiao Yan it was merely SOSO. Cough cough. After repeatedly coughing twice, Xiao Yan raised his head and looked at the short and fat old man across from him who still had an ordinary expression. Compared to Xiao Yan, the short and fat old man was much better. Thus, at this moment, the gaze with which he looked at Xiao Yan involuntarily revealed a mocking smile. Ha 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 ha. Xiao Yan, it seems that you can only flaunt your mouth. With just you, without relying on those methods of yours, it is simply impossible for you to be a match for this old man. The short and fat old man had an insolent expression as he laughed loudly. It was as if defeating Xiao Yan was something that he was extremely proud of. However, when he ridiculed Xiao Yan, he seemed to have forgotten that with his strength as an 8-star half-martial emperor, defeating Xiao Yan, a 5-star half-martial emperor, was something that couldn't be more normal in the hearts of the majority of people. Haha, is that so? I remember that I told you all before that there is a price to pay for unwarranted arrogance. However, from the looks of it, you all don't seem to remember my words. Since that's the case, let me use my actions to tell you all. Hearing this, Xiao Yan involuntarily let out a cold laugh. Only at this moment did his right hand, which had been holding the heavy Xian ruler the entire time, suddenly swing it. As Dou Qi shot out, the pitch-black ruler was already covered by a gorgeous heavenly flame. As the heavy ruler's body streaked through the air, chi-chi sounds of rushing wind were heard. Even from a great distance away, the strong wind pressure caused one to feel suffocated. 7-layered sky-breaking ruler, 2 feet. Suddenly, following an earth-shaking roar from Xiao Yan's mouth, the huge ruler in his hand suddenly streaked through the air in front of him. A frightening ruler light ruthlessly swept toward the short and fat old man like a huge wave on the surface of the sea. Its aura filled the sky. However, in response to this, the short and fat old man's face involuntarily revealed a cold smile. If Xiao Yan had attacked with this ruler while he was unable to react in time, he might really be unable to block it. Unfortunately, Xiao Yan did not do so. Instead, he faced him head-on. In this way, he did not have the slightest room to worry. Haha, Xiao Yan, you should obediently surrender. With just this attack of yours, you will not be able to hurt the old me. The short and fat old man ridiculed. Immediately, he once again waved the huge hammer axe in his hand. The axe was facing upwards. The sharp aura caused the surrounding empty space to involuntarily form circles of invisible spatial ripples. Try this move of the old me. Human class middle level Do technique, splitting mountain and breaking sea. As the cry from the short and fat old man's mouth sounded, the hammer axe in his hand was violently swung upwards. Immediately, an ear-piercing sonic boom resounded unceasingly. The invisible empty space seemed to have been split into two under this axe. The air wherever it passed was isolated by this axe, only leaving behind a vacuum of empty space. Under the support of the Dou Qi, the edge of the axe became incomparably frightening. A vast aura spread out from it, causing one's expression to change. The strength of this axe was likely something that even an expert of the same level would not dare to easily receive, much less Xiao Yan. When Xiao Yan sensed the frightening aura on the axe, his expression involuntarily changed. The strength of this fellow had far exceeded his expectations. However, even if this was the case, it was still unable to change Xiao Yan's determination to kill both of them. Ha 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 ha, good. Since you respect me, I will return you 10 feet. In the next moment, the solemn-faced Xiao Yan suddenly emitted a loud and arrogant laughter that was filled with an untamed feeling. Immediately, the huge ruler in his hand was once again waved. He continuously waved 3 feet and 4 feet overlapped each other, causing the might to become even greater. Even the faces of the 4 people outside the battleground involuntarily revealed a solemn expression when they saw this. This kind of attack was something that even they could not underestimate. Under everyone's gazes, the majestic ruler Glow and the similarly ferocious huge axe swiftly approached each other. Immediately, they violently collided together in the next moment. Bang! The result of the collision between the 2 Do techniques, which had similar auras, was mutual destruction. In the next moment, the energy storm that blotted out the sun swept in all directions like 100,000 feet large wave. The originally clear sky of Qianquan's sky suddenly changed color at this moment. It was covered by a dense energy storm. At this moment, even the expressions of the 4 half-emperors outside involuntarily changed wildly. One by one, they twisted their bodies and wildly fled into the distance as if they were fleeing. When they saw the frightening energy storm from afar, their eyes were filled with endless fear. The energy storm came wave after wave. It continued to hum for over 10 minutes. It was during these 10+ minutes that the entire area was being destroyed. The 4 half-emperors could only maneuver the Do Qi within their bodies and temporarily seal the area within the energy storm. A long while later, when the frightening energy storm was about to scatter, a frightening heavenly flame storm that was not inferior to the former once again swept out from the middle of the battleground. Circular after circular fire lotus petals gradually stood in the air within the space that had been sealed by the 4 half-emperors. They swelled with the wind. When the many layers of fire lotus petals were completely pieced together to form an enormous fire lotus, the Do Qi light barrier that the 4 8-star half-emperors had created together could not help but be forcefully blasted apart. Bang! The heavenly flame storm easily destroyed the Do Qi light barrier that the 4 half-emperors had created together. Only then did its energy scatter. It turned into waves of heat that swept in all directions in the sky. The faces of the 4 half-emperors involuntarily became a little flushed as they sensed the frightening high temperature that was brought about by the heat wave. Their hearts were involuntarily shocked. The might of a heavenly flame was really frightening. When it erupted in this manner, even they felt a grave feeling. They did not even dare to imagine just what kind of ending they would have ended up in if they had been in the middle of the heavenly flame storm earlier. When the storm finally scattered, the few of them lifted their heads and looked over with some lingering fear. Everywhere their eyes passed, there was only a pitch-black endless space. Under the heavenly flame storm, this entire space had unavoidably ended up collapsing. When the gazes of the 4 swept over the entire space, they were finally filled with shock and fear as they discovered that the short and fat old man's figure was actually nowhere to be seen. Such an outcome could only mean one thing. The short and fat old man had already died, and his Tao had vanished. It was extremely likely that not even his corpse was left behind. Dead. The expressions on the faces of the 4 half-emperors became a little dull. Soon after, their mouths involuntarily exclaimed. It was difficult to imagine that an 8-star half-emperor, who had been so mighty a moment ago and had said that he would capture Xiao Yan, would actually become a dead soul in the hands of the other party in mere moments. Only at this moment did the 4 of them recall the words that Xiao Yan had said when they had first met him. Including all of you, the number of 8-star half-emperors who have died in my hands should be around 10. From the looks of it, those words were not groundless. Unwarranted arrogance would really cause them to pay an extremely great price. To a great extent, it had even touched upon their lives. Chapter 396. Cough cough, it seems that the 4 of you are still greedy. In the sky, Xiaoyan covered his chest with one hand and violently coughed twice before speaking with a cold tone. Hearing this, the 4 half-martial emperors frowned and glanced at each other. This time no one spoke again. At the same time, no one attacked Xiaoyan again. Haha, what's wrong? Since you don't dare to speak or attack, then scram. Seeing the expressions of fear on the 4's faces, Xiaoyan couldn't help but sneer. His shout caused the 4's divine souls to feel fear. They had personally seen Xiaoyan kill 2 8-star half-martial emperors in succession. At this moment, when they looked at Xiaoyan, their gazes no longer treated him as an ordinary 5-star half-martial emperor. Instead, they saw him as a true expert with strength comparable to 9-star half-martial emperors. After all, There was no 5-star half-martial emperor that could kill 8-star half-martial emperors. Not to mention, he had killed 2 half-martial emperors in succession in such a short period of time. No matter where he went, no one would dare to easily believe such a feat. When the 4 of them heard the cold and disdainful words spat out from Xiao Yan's mouth, their expressions couldn't help but change slightly. Once again, anger rose from the bottom of their hearts. No matter how one put it, they were at the very least 8-star half-martial emperors. No matter where they went, they would be respected experts. Yet they were currently being reprimanded by a 5-star half-martial emperor. How could they endure this? Even though Xiao Yan's strength far surpassed his cultivation level, this was definitely not a reason for them to lower their heads. Humph, Xiao Yan, in my opinion, you're merely an arrow at the end of its flight. After a long time, the old man in embroidered robes spoke again. His sinister gaze was firmly fixed on Xiao Yan. It seemed as if he wanted to see through something. Even though Xiao Yan's current state didn't appear to be ideal, no one present could guarantee that Xiao Yan didn't have the strength to fight back. The hunter would shoot the bird that sticks out. If any of the 4 of them rashly attacked, then the one who attacked first would be the one who died first. Without a certain degree of certainty, none of the 4 people would make the first move. The probing words of the colorful robed old man at this moment caused the other 3 people to focus their attention on Xiao Yan. They also hoped to see some slight changes on Xiao Yan's face. Unfortunately, the hope in their hearts was ultimately shattered. Xiao Yan did not show the slightest change in his expression because of the words of the colorful robed old man. Instead, the corner of his mouth was lifted slightly, and an extremely cold smile was lifted. Since Your Excellency wants to know my background, why don't you test it out yourself? There's no need for such nonsense. You. The brocade-robed old man immediately knit his brows when he heard the cold laughter in Xiao Yan's mouth. His mouth involuntarily wanted to reprimand Xiao Yan, but the other old man quickly pressed him down. He frowned and shook his head at Xiao Yan. Only then did Xiao Yan's emotions gradually calm down. The 4 8-star half-martial emperors looked at each other and communicated with their eyes. It was a long while later that the somewhat tense atmosphere was broken by a loud laughter. Ha 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 ha, Mr. Xiao Yan really knows how to joke. Earlier, we were merely bewitched by those 2 fellows. That was why we became enemies with you. Now that they have already died in your hands, we can be considered to have been woken up by you. Moreover, we also have quite a big grudge with the 4 large sections. How can we turn around and help them? Cuckoo. The matter earlier was all a misunderstanding. Since both of us are safe and sound now, the old me and the rest of us can be at ease. Oh, is that so? So the 4 of you aren't willing to become my enemy. Since that's the case, why are the 4 of you still staying here? When he heard this, Xiao Yan narrowed his eyes and laughed faintly. He put on a fake smile and mocked the 4 people in front of him. When they heard Xiao Yan's words, the 4 of them could not help but be slightly stunned. The brocade-robed old man who originally wanted to say something was forcibly swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. The 4 of them looked at each other. Only then did they laugh loudly at Xiao Yan. Haha, yes. Your Excellency Xiao Yan is right. Since there's nothing else, we should indeed leave. Haha, Brother Xiao, if we are lucky enough in the future, let's meet again. How about it? The brocade-robed old man looked at Xiao Yan with a kind smile on his face and asked with a smile. Sure. Xiao Yan smiled again. It was as if he did not care about what happened earlier. This caused the 4 people opposite him to laugh unceasingly. In that case, may I know where Brother Xiao is heading to this time? Haha, Brother Xiao, don't worry. We don't mean to find out. We are just curious. After all, perhaps we will meet again in the near future, right? The brocade-robed old man said with a face full of smiles. Xiao Yan also had a face full of smiles. If this scene was seen by someone who did not know the situation, they would probably think that this was an old friend reuniting. Who would have thought that just a moment ago, the 2 sides were in full swing and their killing intent soared. Haha, about this. I am heading to Wushu City. Xiao Yan's eyes flickered with light as he smiled at the brocade-robed old man. Oh. Haha, Wushu City. Since this is the case, Brother Xiao should be careful. According to this old man's knowledge, Wushu City is the territory of the Sword Emperor. Brother Xiao will probably meet people from the Sky Sword sect there. Hearing this, the brocade-robed old man could not bear to look at the other 3 people beside him. Then, a hidden light flashed in his pair of gloomy old eyes. However, the tone of his mouth was full of concern for Xiao Yan. Hearing the words of the other party, Xiao Yan smiled faintly and nodded. He cupped his hands at the brocade-robed old man and said with a smile, "In that case, thank you very much, brother. I wonder what your name is. After all, only you know me, but I don't know you. It doesn't make sense." Xiao Yan looked at the brocade-robed old man and smiled curiously. Hearing this, the brocade-robed old man immediately smiled and patted his forehead with his palm. It seemed that Xiao Yan's words made him feel a little embarrassed. "This old man is Wang Liang. Because of the ghost head broadsword in my hand, people have given me the nickname Wang Liang. If Brother Xiao has any trouble in the future, you can call this old man's name directly. It can also scare off some troublemakers." The brocade-robed old man stroked his beard with one hand and laughed with a proud face. Xiao Yan immediately smiled and nodded when he heard this. However, no one knew what he was muttering in his heart. "Haha, alright. I will remember brother's name. I still have some matters to attend to and will leave first. Everyone, goodbye." Xiao Yan cupped his hands together and laughed loudly as he spoke to the 4 of them. This was especially the case for the last few words. They appeared incomparably thick when they were emitted from Xiao Yan's mouth, allowing the 4 people in front of him to clearly hear them. After his voice sounded, Xiao Yan also coincidentally turned around. His feet moved and he flew toward the northern sky. At this moment, the 4 people behind Xiao Yan suddenly stepped violently on empty air. In the blink of an eye, they had already arrived beside Xiao Yan before he could turn around. With a wave of their large hands, Doqi agglomerated in their palms and a palm landed violently on Xiao Yan. "Ha ha ha. There is a price to pay for gratuitous arrogance. This old man will return these words to you later. Brat, if you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too arrogant. You dare to act so arrogantly in front of us 4 8-star half-martial emperors. You are truly extremely foolish." At the same time as his palm landed violently on the back of Xiao Yan's head, the brocade-robed old man was finally unable to contain himself and emitted an extremely crazy and hoarse laughter. His words were filled with disdain for Xiao Yan. However, in the next instant, "Oh, is that so? Could it be that you really think that I would leave my back to a group of people whose minds are filled with the desire to kill me?" A long and drawn-out cold laughter slowly sounded in the sky. It was like the sound of a bell echoing endlessly. After these words were spoken, an even colder and emotionless ice-cold voice once again resounded in the sky. "Explode." Chapter 397. What? At the instant that indifferent voice resounded through the entire sky, Xiao Yan, who was about to be killed by the 4 half-martial emperors, suddenly began to swell. At the same time, an extremely berserk and terrifying aura began to rapidly spread from Xiao Yan's body. What? When the 4 8-star half-martial emperors saw this scene, their expressions changed greatly. That was because the aura that was being emitted from Xiao Yan's body was something that even they were unable to endure. This guy, has he gone mad? He actually self-detonated. Quickly retreat. This kid is going to self-detonate. The 4 of them repeatedly roared. Unfortunately, it was already too late. The aura within Xiao Yan's body in front of them had already reached its peak. Xiao Yan's entire body had swelled to over 3 times its original size. His entire body was covered with densely packed crack lines. Numerous glaring light shot out from those crack lines, piercing one's eyes. Heh, you're only thinking of retreating now. Too late. When Xiao Yan saw the terrified expressions on the 4 of them, Xiao Yan's ice-cold mocking laughter resounded throughout the world. Earlier, I gave you all a chance. Unfortunately, you all did not properly grasp it. My lord, we know that we were wrong. Quickly, please retract it. If this continues at that time, we won't be the only ones to die. Xiao Yan, you gave up such a great future and used self-detonation as the price to kill us today. Could it be that you don't feel that it's a pity? It's still not too late for you to stop now. As long as you stop, the 4 of us will turn around and leave this time. We will absolutely not have the slightest bit of evil thoughts. At this moment, The four of them were finally in a complete panic. They began to shout non-stop. No matter what they called Xiaoyan, no matter what they said, they only hoped that Xiaoyan would stop. After all, the self-detonation of a 5-star half-martial emperor was something that even they would not be able to endure. Haha, there's no turning back. You all chose this yourselves. You can't blame me. Furthermore, who said that I would die with you all? Haha, in your next life, you must remember that before dealing with someone, you must first understand the strength of that person. Otherwise, you'll only die. The instant Xiaoyan's words left his mouth, Xiaoyan, who was on the verge of exploding, finally exploded with a roar. At this moment, the frightening energy storm swept forth once again. A burst of dazzling white light covered the sky and covered the sun. Even the light of the sun was enveloped by the white light. The entire world turned white. Even if one was very close to it, one would still be unable to see anything clearly. Everything in the world was replaced by the white light. It was as if the entire world had changed. Top and bottom were white. Heaven and earth were indistinguishable, much less north, south, east and west. However, it was precisely within this white light that one could clearly hear heart-wrenching and lung-splitting screams. Within this boundless white light, this sort of miserable screams caused one to be as silent as cicadas in winter. One could feel a formless sense of coldness within this white light. The white light continued for a long time. The miserable screams seemed to have been born into this world and did not stop. Only when the white light gradually disappeared and completely disappeared, the entire world could finally be seen clearly. However, it was no longer its original appearance. At this moment, all that one could see was an empty and endless empty space. Even the originally extended mountain range below had turned into an abyss at this moment. This was a collapse caused by the shattering of empty space. Unless there was an expert who exhausted the do-qi within his or her body to restore this place, it would be impossible for this place to recover its original appearance within the next tens, or even hundreds of years. Xiaoyan slowly stepped out of a tent in the empty sky. He no longer doubted the strength that was created when his avatar self-destructed. Although it was impossible for him to kill these four people, it was sufficient to let them have a good drink. Xiaoyan's avatar had been destroyed. Withdrawing his gaze, Xiaoyan's expression was a little absent-minded as he swept his gaze over the endless abyss below. His heart involuntarily felt a little emotional. A powerful strength was indeed able to protect oneself and the people one wished to protect. However, at the same time, a powerful strength would also bring about destruction to this world. It was precisely because of all kinds of greed and killing that the rules of this world had changed. It was precisely because of the words "the strong are respected" that this world was filled with desolation. Ugh, Xiaoyan sighed for some reason. Only then did his face once again recover a serious expression. His dense gaze did not contain the slightest emotion as he continued to sweep his gaze over the endless abyss below. Finally, his gaze landed on 4 human figures with weak auras. These 4 human figures were the 4 8-star half-emperors. However, compared to before, their powerful auras appeared a little weak at this moment. Although they did not end up being seriously injured, they were not much better off. Xiaoyan's eyes were ice cold. He would never show mercy to those who wanted to kill him. Who? Xiaoyan softly cried out in a somewhat strenuous manner. After repeatedly using high-class Do skills and exhausting the strength of his incarnation, the current Xiaoyan had become extremely weak. However, he was unwilling to reveal this in front of these 4 people. Xiaoyan leaped down and landed in front of the 4 miserable-looking human figures. With a wave of his hand, the heavy Xian ruler landed in his hand. The wind pressure brought about by the descent of the heavy Xian ruler caused the expressions of the 4 people before Xiaoyan to change. Compared to before, the auras of these 4 people were extremely weak at this moment. Their entire bodies emitted a feeling of weakness. Even though they still possessed the strength to retaliate, they were unable to raise any strength to refute this black-robed young man before them. As long as they saw Xiaoyan's calm appearance, they had already lost all confidence in themselves. This brat with the strength of a mere 5-star half-emperor seemed to be a frightening existence that they would never be able to defeat. When they thought of this, the bodies of the 4 people involuntarily trembled violently. They felt incomparable grief in their hearts. Was this black-robed young man before them truly only a half-emperor? You exactly who are you? Your strength, exactly what level is it at? Are you really a human? Or perhaps, this body is not your original body? At this moment, the four people had already lost all of their battle strength. Their hearts were filled with fear, and they knew that their deaths had arrived. This was especially true for that black-robed old man. At this moment, he was filled with endless regret. Before the battle, he had clearly felt fear from the bottom of his heart. It was the premonition of death. Unfortunately, he did not take it to heart. At this moment, it would appear that he had truly brought this upon himself. Hearing those words, Xiaoyan continued to walk forward as he answered the four people's questions. I, Xiaoyan, am a 5-star half-emperor human. The person standing before you all is my original body. As for this battle, it has ended. Chapter 398. Seeing the deeply shocked expressions on the faces of the four people before him, Xiaoyan sneered. Humans were like this. The more realistic the result was, the more difficult it would be for them to believe it. However, Xiaoyan was disinclined to pay attention to this. Holding the heavy buster sword in his hand, he walked through the air. Every step he took seemed to have landed on the hearts of the 4 8-star half-martial emperors, causing their divine souls to tremble in fear. Stomp! 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 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. When Xiaoyan arrived before the 4 old men with slow steps, the complexions of the 4 old men had already turned deathly pale. Their bodies trembled unceasingly, and streams of cold sweat rolled down from their foreheads like rain. Their complexions were completely pale, and they appeared as if they had contracted some sort of serious illness. Not only were their bodies trembling, but even their hearts and souls were filled with extreme fear. Before this, they had never imagined that they would actually die at the hands of a 5-star half-martial emperor. Normally, people of this level would be extremely respectful and reverent toward them. Even if it was a 7-star half-martial emperor, they would still have to put on an appearance of being of low status before them. However, today Xiaoyan had completely overturned their usual habits, as well as the imaginations they had in their hearts. Xiaoyan's expression was grim and expressionless. In a few steps, he had already arrived before the most heavily injured old man among the 4. Seeing Xiaoyan arriving before him, the old man's heart was filled with fear. Everyone feared death, let alone this old man who had cultivated for several hundred years. In his heart, he was even more unwilling to die. At this moment, when he saw Xiaoyan, it was as if he had seen the Grim Reaper. It was as if there was a huge rock pressing down on his chest, causing his breathing to become hurried. You. Although the old man wanted to say something, the fear that came from the depths of his soul made it difficult for him to open his mouth. He stuttered and said the word you with great difficulty, but he couldn't spit out a single word. Facing this, Xiaoyan's expression did not change at all. He stood in front of the elder and raised the giant ruler in his hand. The body of the ruler was covered with a magnificent strange fire. The terrifying strange fire was like a ghost fire from hell in the eyes of the elder, causing him to be unable to control himself. 7-layered heaven-breaking ruler, 5 feet. The cold words slowly came out of his mouth. At the same time, the giant ruler in Xiaoyan's hand also carried an extremely oppressive sound of breaking wind as it quickly descended. In the end, under the terrified gazes of the other 3 old men, it fiercely smashed onto the chest of the old man in front of Xiaoyan. Boom! Along with the crackling sound of bones breaking, the others clearly heard a muffled sound that was like a balloon exploding. Needless to say, the heart of the old man had probably been crushed and exploded under this ruler. Following this sound, the body of the old man that was floating in the air also quickly fell down uncontrollably. The moment the old man's body fell, Xiaoyan stretched out his hand and a suction force surged from his palm. Immediately after, a slightly illusory figure was forcefully pulled out of the body. Xiaoyan, this old man's body has been destroyed and I won't be able to live for long. Why do you have to kill me? As his soul was pulled out, the old man's painful roar immediately sounded. When the other 3 saw this, they couldn't help but feel even more terrified by Xiaoyan's move. They didn't expect Xiaoyan to be so ruthless even though he looked so young. He was not inferior to some old monsters who had lived for a long time. I have never left any future troubles for myself. Even if you are just a soul and won't be able to live for long, as long as you have the intention, you can still bring me endless trouble. I don't like trouble. Xiao Yan's expression was calm as he spoke indifferently to the old man's roar. Of course, although that was what he said, this was only one of Xiao Yan's goals. The other was related to his ancestor, Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian's remnant soul required extremely pure spiritual origin as energy to nourish. Xiao Yan naturally couldn't kill those unrelated to him to help his ancestor. Xiao Yan would never leave these enemies who wanted to kill him alive. Therefore, this became a method for Xiao Yan to obtain the spiritual origin energy. With a clench of his hand, Xiao Yan casually grabbed the old man's soul in his palm. Subsequently, the purifying demonic lotus flame and the fallen heart flame appeared in his palm at the same time. In an instant, he wiped out the old man's consciousness and began to refine the spiritual strength in his hand. A moment later, after the spiritual strength in his hand was completely refined, Xiao Yan temporarily kept it in his body, and once again looked at the other three old men. After a moment of relief, the three of them gradually calmed down. They knew that it would be difficult for them to escape this time. Therefore, they no longer struggled and begged for mercy. Instead, they looked at each other, and then looked at Xiao Yan. The old man in embroidered robes once again had a ruthless expression on his face, as he said to the other two beside him in a serious voice, "Two of you. The two of you, I truly did not expect that we Grand 8-star half-martial emperors would actually die at the hands of a 5-star half-martial emperor today. However, even if we die, we must make this guy suffer a great loss for us, and let him know that we, Grand 8-star half-martial emperors, are absolutely not pushovers that anyone can pinch." Cough cough. Xiao Yan, come. Today, even if we have to stake our lives, we will definitely make you pay for this. At this moment, the other old man also stood up. He took a deep breath, and his gaze suddenly became resolute. He extended his hand and beckoned, and a long sword appeared in his hand. He swung the long sword, and the tip of the sword pointed directly at Xiao Yan. At the same time, the black-robed old man on the other side also raised his head. His withered hand grasped the air, and a pitch-black long stick with a metallic luster and mysterious runes engraved on it appeared in the old man's hand. The long stick was waved, and it emitted whistling sounds in the air. Soon after, it was pointed at Xiao Yan. The embroidered-robed old man waved his hand, and a large golden blade appeared in his hand. He held the hilt of the blade with one hand, and the back of the blade with the other. The tip of the blade was also pointed at Xiao Yan. Everyone attacked together. If you can kill him, kill him. If you can't kill him, even if you have to risk self-detonating, you must take his life. The embroidered-robed old man shouted sternly. Soon after, his body moved, and he waved the large golden blade in his hand, and rushed towards Xiao Yan. On the other side, the other two old men also leapt forward, and rushed explosively towards Xiao Yan. Counterattack before death? It's useless. As he saw the three people rushing towards him, Xiao Yan coldly snorted. His body suddenly turned around, and the enormous ruler in his hand was violently waved 2 feet in succession. A majestic ruler ray shot out, and it was directly aimed at the 3 8-star half-martial emperors before him. Amen. However, at the instant when the ruler ray was about to collide with the 3 people, Xiao Yan suddenly started to frown. At the instant when the ruler ray was waved, the embroidered-robed old man's body that was rushing forward was actually forcibly stopped. After that, his body turned around, and without even turning his head around, he began to rapidly flee toward the distant horizon. This guy had actually betrayed his companions at such a crucial moment. Of course, the other 2 8-star half-martial emperors also sensed the actions of the embroidered-robed old man. Immediately, the expressions on their faces changed rapidly. They truly did not expect that this guy would actually use them as shields, and betray them in order to obtain an opportunity to survive. This sort of action was simply despicable. Even if it was Xiao Yan, he was unable to tolerate it. Chapter 399. When the earth-shattering explosion swept across the entire area, Xiao Yan, who was in the air, moved and once again stepped into the 6 tents that had just been formed. Chi! 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 Due to the short travel distance of the 6 tents, Xiaoyan had to quickly travel through them 3 times. Coupled with the astonishing speed of the sky extinction steps, he finally appeared in front of the brocade-robed old man. The giant ruler in his hand was swung horizontally, and the tip of the ruler was directly stuck in the old man's throat. If he had not stopped in time, he would have crashed into the old man. In my life, I hate people like you who go back on your words the most. Since you want to die, I will fulfill your wish. The large ruler in Xiaoyan's hand suddenly swung downward after his cold cry sounded. The wide body of the ruler suddenly smashed into the chest of the colorful robed old man. Following the spurting of fresh blood, the old man's body flew back uncontrollably. He was just like a soccer ball that had been kicked, leaving behind a perfect arc in the empty air. In the next moment, before the brocade-robed old man could stop his body, Xiaoyan moved his feet and executed the sky extinction steps once again. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived behind the old man. The giant ruler in his hand swept out, and the heavy ruler once again smashed into the old man's back. The cracking sound of bones breaking rang out, and blood splattered everywhere. Blood gushed out of the old man's mouth like a fountain, and his aura rapidly withered. He was on the verge of being seriously injured. Cough cough. You mother***er. Before the old man could finish his words, Xiaoyan's ferocious ruler smashed into his face. The terrifying force almost broke his neck. Bang! 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 Violent bangs rang out incessantly. On the other side, the heavily injured old man in black robes and his companion were horrified. Even the thought of escaping in their hearts had been completely thrown to the back of their minds. At this moment, they were already heavily injured, and it was not convenient for them to move. To them, escaping was basically an extravagant hope. Rather than running away, it was better to calm down and face the coming death. Perhaps this would make them feel better. Boom! Another heavy blow smashed into the old man. At this moment, the old man in embroidered robes seemed to have become a completely different person. His embroidered robes were in tatters, making him look like a beggar. His entire body was drenched in blood, and half of his face had been smashed by the huge ruler, until it was deformed. There were even a few extremely ghastly pits on his chest. His internal organs had long since been shattered and separated. Even though Xiaoyan's attacks did not contain the slightest bit of douqi, with merely his physical body's cultivation, it was still difficult for this 8-star half-martial emperor to endure. Although the old man opened his mouth to say something, he still found it difficult to express himself. It was only after a long while that he bent his body and crawled in the air. His voice was muffled with difficulty as he said with difficulty, "Brother, Xiaoyan, even if I die today, I'll drag you down with me." Even though he was already seriously injured, this old man was still unwilling to forgive Xiaoyan. He had already truly given up on the possibility of living. He did not believe that he would have the chance to live today. Since this was the case, even if he had to stake his life, he would make Xiaoyan pay the price. Following the words from the old man's mouth, the douqi within his body suddenly became berserk. A frightening energy filled with an aura of destruction was unceasingly being emitted from the old man's seriously injured body. From the looks of it, this old man seemed to be planning to self-destruct. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the two 8-star half-martial emperors changed. They had never imagined that this old man would be crazy to such an extent. He was actually willing to risk his own life to make Xiaoyan pay the price. However, in Xiaoyan's eyes, this crazy action of the old man turned into a sneer of ridicule. In the next instant, Xiaoyan's body suddenly flashed and he appeared in front of the old man. With a flip of his palm, he was about to ruthlessly smash his palm onto the old man's head. However, in the next instant, the old man started to madly laugh. His distorted face was filled with a sinister expression. His two arms suddenly hugged Xiaoyan, wanting to lock him in his embrace and perish together with him. Ha 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 ha. Die. If I die, you'll die with me. Ha 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 ha. If die. Sure, but you should die alone. If you want me to die, you're still a little too inexperienced. Xiaoyan laughed mockingly when he heard this. His expression was cold as he raised his hand. A turbulent spiritual strength gathered in his palm. Immediately, it violently smashed toward the old man's head. Xiao Yan's expression was cold. Heavenly Hand. Extinguish. Heaven rank soul skill, Heavenly Hand. It was specialized in causing harm to the soul. With Xiao Yan's current soul realm, its might was even more frightening. With a single palm strike, the old man's soul was forcibly shattered. At the same time, the berserk do qi within his body instantly turned into nothingness. It rapidly dissipated and merged with the heaven and earth. At this moment, another 8-star half-martial emperor had died by Xiao Yan's hands. After dealing with the embroidered-gowned old man, Xiao Yan leaped and arrived before the remaining 2 8-star half-martial emperors. At this moment, the two of them had already lost all their will to fight. They were only waiting for Xiao Yan to come and collect their corpses. Seeing the ashen faces of the 2 8-star half-martial emperors, Xiao Yan's pale face relaxed. No matter what, facing 6 8-star half-martial emperors by himself was still too difficult for him. Xiao Yan didn't even dare to imagine what he would do if the two of them didn't lose their will to fight, and instead fought with their lives on the line. However, what made Xiao Yan feel fortunate was that the two of them didn't do that. Qi. The sound of rushing wind appeared once again. Xiao Yan's face was filled with difficulty as he held the hilt of the ruler with both hands. He raised the heavy Xian ruler in his hand high in the air, intending to give the two of them a final blow and finish off this trouble in one go. However, things did not go as planned. Just as Xiao Yan was about to attack, Guyu's voice suddenly sounded in Xiao Yan's heart. Xiao Yan, be careful. Someone is heading this way. Moreover, it is very likely that they are coming for you. Guyu's sudden words caused Xiao Yan's expression to involuntarily become startled. He only recovered after a while and coldly laughed in his heart. With the Northern King and Xiao Jin around,